She was 8 years old, barefoot on a country road at 4 in the morning, running from the only home she'd ever known. Behind her, headlights cut through the rain like two cold eyes. The truck was coming, and somewhere ahead, through the dark and the mud and the sound of her own heartbeat hammering in her ears, a roadside diner glowed orange against the black sky. And inside it, a man sat alone. Leather vest, scarred hands, eyes that had seen things no man should carry. He wasn't looking for a child to save. He wasn't looking for anything at all. But when that little girl pressed herself against his back and whispered, "He's coming for me," something inside Jack Mercer that had been dead for 3 years suddenly cracked open. Hey, if you've ever felt like the system failed you, like nobody was coming, like you were completely alone, stay until the very end of this story. Because what happens to Emma Parker is going to hit you somewhere deep. Don't forget to hit that like button before we get started and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. Now let's go. The rain started before the alarm clocks did. It came in sideways off the flat Midwestern fields, the kind of cold October rain that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives, like bad news always does, without knocking. It tapped against the windows of the Parker farmhouse in a rhythm that had no mercy in it, steady and indifferent and dark. Emma heard it first. She always did. She lay in the narrow bed beneath the slanted roof of her room, the one with the water stain shaped like a hand above the window, and she listened. 8 years old, small for her age, with her father's dark eyes, and the particular stillness of a child who has learned that keeping still is a form of survival. She'd been awake since 3. She was usually awake since 3. The voices downstairs had been going for an hour. Not screaming. That was the thing about Ryan Holt that confused everybody who met him. He never screamed. He had a voice like a door closing in a quiet house, low and final. And when he was angry, the air around him went tight in a way that Emma felt in her sternum before she heard anything at all. She'd learned to read the silences between his words the way other kids read weather. "We're 3 months out," he was saying now, his voice coming up through the floorboards, through the braided rug and the cold wood. 3 months. I'm not panicking, Karen. I'm telling you the math. Her mother's voice was harder to catch, softer, higher. It floated and broke apart in the drafts that moved through the old house like something living. "Can't keep doing this. I know what I said, I know, but the ground is frozen and the Calhoun contract fell through, and that leaves us, Karen, listen to me, that leaves us with nothing by December. Nothing." Emma pulled her knees to her chest. She'd been doing that a lot lately, making herself smaller. Running out of options. That phrase. That specific arrangement of words. It grabbed something inside Emma's chest and it held on. Running out of options. She turned it over the way she turned over broken things she found at the edge of fields. Carefully, examining each edge, trying to understand what it had been before it broke. She didn't sleep again. By the time gray light started pressing at the window, she'd been through it 100 times. The overdue bills she'd seen on the kitchen table when she wasn't supposed to be looking. The way her mother had been quiet at dinner for 2 weeks straight. The way Ryan had driven past the grain elevator 3 times last Tuesday without stopping. Just driving in slow circles like a man trying to remember what came next. And then, in the morning, while her mother was at the neighbor's returning a casserole dish, Emma saw Ryan loading the truck. She was watching from the upstairs window, the one that looked out over the yard. He was moving with purpose. That's what she noticed first. Not the defeated shuffle he'd had lately. Purpose. He carried things from the barn. A coil of heavy rope. A roll of duct tape. A canvas tarp, dark green, folded and tucked under his arm. Emma's mind did what frightened children's minds do. It connected the dots it had available to it. Running out of options. Rope, tape, the tarp, the way he'd been so quiet. She was 8 years old. She'd already lost one father. And her brain, wired by grief and anxiety, and 2 years of overhearing too many adult conversations through too many walls, assembled those pieces into the only picture that made a particular, terrible kind of sense. She was down the stairs and out the back door before she had time to think it through. No shoes. She didn't go back for shoes. The gravel bit into her feet the second she hit the driveway, but she was already running, cutting across the east field where the grass was flattened and wet, heading for the road. The rain was picking back up. She could feel it now, cold and specific on her scalp, running down the back of her neck beneath the thin pajama top she hadn't thought to change out of. Behind her, the farmhouse sat quiet. No one had seen her go. The road was empty. County Route 9, 2 lanes, cracked asphalt with a center line so faded it was more suggestion than instruction. She ran until she couldn't run anymore, and then she walked, and then she ran again. The fields on either side were flat and open and offered nothing. No houses with lights on, no passing cars. Just the road ahead and the road behind and the rain coming down like the sky was tired of holding it. She didn't know how far she'd gone when her legs finally stopped cooperating. She was standing at the edge of the ditch on the south shoulder, her feet so cold she could barely feel the gravel anymore, her breathing coming in ragged pulls that hurt in her chest. The sky was getting lighter in a gray, reluctant way, like it didn't want to commit to morning. And then, through the rain, she saw the light. Orange. Warm. A half-mile up the road, a sign blinked on and off. Open. Beneath it, a low building with a gravel lot and a row of motorcycles lined up out front, massive and gleaming even in the wet dark, their chrome catching the neon in fragments. She counted them without meaning to. 7 bikes. Big ones. She didn't think about who might be inside, she just walked toward the light. The Rust Creek Diner had been on that stretch of Route 9 for 40 years, and it had survived 2 floods, 1 fire, and the particular slow death of the highway bypass that rerouted the long-haul trucks away from Mill Haven in 2009. It survived because Dolores Kwan, 71 years old and approximately 5 feet tall, refused to let it die. And because there was a segment of the regional population, specifically the kind of men who rode at night and needed coffee and eggs at 4:30 in the morning and didn't want to explain themselves, who had come to consider it essential. This morning, that segment occupied 4 of the 12 stools and 2 of the corner booths. Jack Mercer occupied the last stool at the counter, left end, nearest the door. He'd been there since 2 a.m., which wasn't unusual. He'd ridden in from somewhere that nobody at the counter had asked about, which also wasn't unusual. He'd ordered coffee and then a second coffee, and then asked Dolores quietly if the eggs were still good, and she'd said the eggs were always good, and he'd nodded and ordered them scrambled, dry. He'd eaten without tasting anything. He'd been staring at the counter for most of the last hour. Jack was 44 years old, and he looked like a man who'd been put together correctly once and then taken apart and reassembled without the instructions. He was broad through the shoulders, with hands that were large and scarred in specific ways, the right one worse than the left. The knuckles of both thickened from old injuries that hadn't healed quite straight. His face was angular, weather-cut, with a jaw that needed a razor and eyes the color of February ice. Not cold exactly, but the particular gray-blue of something that had been frozen for a long time. He had a beard that came in dark and going silver in patches. He wore his cut over a worn flannel shirt, the leather old enough to have lost its stiffness. The patches of the Iron Valley chapter sitting flat against his chest like they'd been there so long they'd become part of him. He wasn't talking to anyone. The other men in the diner weren't talking to him. This was not an unfriendly arrangement. It was the particular silence of men who understood that some nights you rode alone and you sat alone and you didn't need anything explained. The bell above the diner door made a sound like a small emergency. Nobody looked up at first, and then Dolores said quietly, "Oh, honey," and the whole room shifted. Set. Emma Parker came through the door of the Rust Creek Diner looking like something the storm had lost. Her pajamas, pale blue with small clouds printed on them, the kind with the long sleeves, were soaked dark and plastered to her skin. Her feet were bare and bleeding in 2 places, small cuts from the gravel, and her hair was flattened against her head in ropes. She was shaking so hard her teeth were knocking together in short, irregular bursts, and her eyes, when they moved around the room, had the wide, unfocused quality of a child who has been running on adrenaline for so long that the adrenaline is starting to run out. She stopped just inside the door. 8 men in leather vests were looking at her. She didn't run. To her credit, to the particular credit of whatever combination of desperation and exhaustion and stubbornness she'd been built with, she held her ground. She looked at each of them, fast, evaluating. Something in her that was older than 8 years old was doing the math. Dolores was already coming around the counter with a dish towel and purpose. "Come here, sweetheart. Let's get you—" "I'm okay," Emma said. Her voice was thin and cracked. She was not okay, but she said it with a flat certainty that made two of the men at the counter exchange a look. Jack didn't move. He turned on his stool, slow, and looked at the kid in the doorway. He took in the bare feet, the blood on her right heel, the pajamas, the way her eyes kept going to the window that faced the road. "Come sit down," Dolores said. Not a suggestion. Emma moved into the diner. She chose the stool next to Jack, which surprised Dolores and mildly surprised the man himself, given that there were 11 other available options. She climbed up onto it with some effort and sat facing the counter with her hands pressed flat on her thighs. Dolores put the dish towel around her shoulders and disappeared toward the back. Jack watched the kid's reflection in the dark window above the coffee machine. She was staring at the counter. Her jaw was set. "You want coffee?" he said. She glanced at him sidelong. "I'm 8. "Hot chocolate, then. Dolores makes it from scratch," he paused. "Cocoa powder and everything." A fractional hesitation. "Okay." He flagged Dolores and ordered it without looking away from the window. The rain was doing something particular now, coming almost horizontal in gusts, and the parking lot was a mess of standing water and moving light. The bikes outside were dark shapes in the wet. The kid watched the window. Jack watched the kid watching the window. "You live around here?" he said. "No." "Where do you live?" She thought about it. "Nowhere? Right now." He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and she held his gaze for a second before dropping it back to the counter. Most adults looked away when he looked at them directly. 8-year-old kids almost always did immediately. This one held it for a 3 count. "You run away?" he said. "I left." "What's the difference?" She pressed her lips together. "Running away means you're coming back." He had nothing for that. He picked up his coffee. Well, Dolores brought the hot chocolate in a heavy white mug, the real thing, dark and steaming, with a skin of something sweet on top. And the kid wrapped both her small, bleeding hands around it without being told to. She didn't drink it immediately. She sat with it, absorbing the heat, and some of the rigid trembling in her shoulders started to ease by degrees. Jack watched the window. It was almost 5 a.m. The 2 men in the far booth had gone back to their conversation, low and unintelligible. The 3 at the stools were eating. Dolores moved behind the counter with the particular efficiency of a woman who had seen a lot of things in 40 years and had learned not to ask too many questions before the 3rd cup of coffee. "Is someone going to come looking for you?" Jack said. The kid's hands tightened on the mug. "Maybe," she said. "Mother? Father?" A pause. The particular weight of a pause. "My dad died." He kept his eyes on the window. "I'm sorry." "It was 2 years ago." She said it like she was correcting a math problem. "I have a stepfather, Ryan." "Ryan's the one you're running from." It wasn't a question. She looked at him. "I left," she said, precise. "Right." He turned the coffee mug in a slow circle on the counter. "Ryan do something to you?" "Not yet." The temperature in the conversation dropped by several degrees. Jack put the mug down and looked at her fully now. She met his eyes, and there was something there, not fear exactly, but the compressed, exhausted vigilance of a child who had been watching for danger for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like not to. "Emma Parker," she said, unexpectedly. "That's my name. In case—" She stopped, reconsidered. "In case someone needs to know." "Jack?" he said. "Just Jack?" "Jack Mercer." She looked at the patches on his cut. He saw her reading them, or trying to. Iron Valley chapter rocker, the center patch he'd had for 16 years. "Are you a good guy?" she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Outside, a semi went past on Route 9 without slowing, its wake sending a wave across the standing water in the lot. "I'm a guy who drinks coffee at 5 in the morning and doesn't ask too many questions," he said. "That's about all I can promise you right now." She considered this, apparently found it acceptable. She lifted the mug and drank. The headlights came at 5:17. Jack saw them first because he'd been watching for them since the minute the kid sat down. High beams sweeping the lot as the truck turned in from Route 9. The engine sound different from the semis, closer, heavier in a domestic way. The sound of a truck that worked for a living. It pulled to a stop in the lot facing the diner, and the headlights held. Emma heard the sound. He felt her go rigid on the stool beside him, every muscle in her small body locked up in the space between one breath and the next. And she set the mug down with a care that was almost ceremonial, as if she was setting it down for the last time. "That him?" Jack said. She didn't answer. She slid off the stool. And then she did something he would think about for the rest of his life. She stepped behind him. Not around him, not to the side. Behind him, pressing herself against his back between him and the counter, her hands gripping the back of his leather cut in two small fists, and she made herself as small as she could, her forehead just touching the middle of his back between his shoulder blades. He felt it the way you feel a match strike in the dark. "He's coming for me," she whispered. Jack Mercer didn't move. He sat on the stool with both hands flat on the counter, and he looked at the truck idling in the lot, and something happened behind his eyes that nobody in the diner could see but Dolores, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway. She saw it, and she looked away because some things are private even in a public place. The driver's door of the truck opened. Ryan Holt was a large man, big-framed and getting heavy through the middle, wearing a waterproof jacket and a baseball cap dark with rain. He stood in the lot and looked at the diner. He hadn't seen Emma yet. He was just standing there with that particular stillness of a man trying to decide something. The diner bell rang. Ryan Holt came through the door and stopped. The room went the kind of quiet that has weight to it. 6 men in leather vests. Dolores, still as a photograph. The kid, invisible behind a wall of scarred hands and old leather. Ryan's eyes moved around the room the way a man's eyes move when he's scared and trying not to show it. He spotted Dolores. "Ma'am, I'm looking for a little girl. 8 years old, dark hair. She ran off this morning in the rain. She wasn't dressed for..." His voice cracked, fractionally. "She's got no shoes on." Jack stayed exactly where he was. "Haven't seen any little girls," said one of the men at the counter. Dex Cawley, 38, Iron Valley road captain, a man who could lie through a polygraph without changing his pulse rate. Ryan looked at him, looked around the room again. His gaze went past Jack's back and found nothing and moved on. He exhaled. Her name's Emma. She's had a hard year. He pressed his mouth together. She gets scared. She overthinks things. I just need to know she's safe." Nobody said anything. Ryan's eyes came back to Jack, not with suspicion, with the helpless, specific look of a man who has run out of other people to appeal to. "You see anything on the road when you rode in? A kid, walking, on Route 9? Jack looked at him. Nothing on Route 9. Which was true. He'd come in from the east off the county highway. Route 9 had been empty when he passed it. Ryan stood there another moment. Something moved through his face. Exhaustion, mainly, and underneath it, something that looked uncomfortably like real grief. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He turned to Dolores. "If she comes in, if anyone sees her, the number to Millhaven Sheriff's Department is..." "I know the number," Dolores said. He nodded. He went back out into the rain. They listened to the truck engine. It idled. Then it moved, north on Route 9. The headlights swept the window and went dark. In the silence that followed, Emma Parker slowly released her grip on the back of Jack's cut. He heard her breathing, fast and shallow, starting to slow. He didn't turn around. "He looked scared," she said, very quietly. "Yeah," Jack said. "That doesn't mean..." She stopped. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." Dolores brought more hot chocolate without being asked. She also brought a pair of wool socks that she produced from somewhere in the back, large men's hiking socks, which she put on Emma's feet with a matter-of-fact efficiency while the kid sat on the stool and looked at the counter. Dolores cleaned the 2 small cuts on her heel with antiseptic from the first aid kit and covered them with 2 strips of medical tape, and she didn't ask a single question during any of it, which was either profound instinct or 40 years of experience, or both. The diner emptied out by 6. The Iron Valley men paid their tabs, zipped up, nodded once to Jack on the way out. Dex Cawley stopped at the end of the counter and looked at the kid and then at Jack with a question in it, and Jack answered the question with a slight movement of his chin that meant, "I've got it," and Dex walked out without a word. That was the thing about men like this. They didn't require narrative. Emma watched the bikes leave through the window. The sound of them going, that particular layered thunder of multiple Harleys pulling out in sequence, dropping into gear, rolling out onto wet asphalt. It was the kind of sound that either frightened people or steadied them, and something in Emma's face, as she watched them go, looked steadied. "Where's your chapter?" she asked him. He looked at her. "What?" "It says Iron Valley. Where's that?" "About 60 miles east." "You live there?" "I live wherever the road goes," he said, and immediately felt the cliché of it, the way you feel the cliché of the thing you've said 100 times and actually mean. She absorbed this. "That sounds lonely." He didn't answer. "My dad used to say that home is a thing you carry," she said. "Not a place." She picked at the edge of the medical tape on her heel. "I didn't understand what that meant when he said it. I think I'm starting to now." Jack put his hands around his coffee mug and looked at the window. The rain was letting up, finally, going from horizontal to vertical to a fine mist that blurred the edges of things. "What did your dad do?" he said. "He drove trucks, long haul. He was gone a lot." She paused. "But when he came home, it was—" She stopped again, pressed her lips together in the same way she had before, that particular compression that seemed to be how she managed things that were too large. "It was enough. He made it enough." Jack said nothing. "Do you have kids?" she said. The question hit him in the sternum. Not because he wasn't used to it. He was used to it. He'd had 3 years of practice being used to it. But because of the way she asked it. Without guile. Direct. The way kids ask things that adults have learned to talk around. "I had a daughter," he said. The past tense landed in the quiet of the diner like a stone into still water. Emma looked at him. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," which was what adults always said, which meant nothing, which was really just a way of moving past a thing without looking at it. She looked at him, and she waited. And that was worse and better simultaneously. "Her name was Grace," he said. "She was—" He stopped. He hadn't said her name out loud in 7 months. "She was 10, he said, "when she died." Emma nodded. "How long ago?" 3 years. She looked at the counter. "Do you still see her, like, in your head?" "Every day." "Me too," she said. "My dad. I see him at the edge of the field sometimes, like, not— I know he's not there, but I look anyway." Jack looked at his hands. "I ran out into the rain this morning because I thought—" She stopped, started again. "I heard them talking about money, and I saw Ryan loading the truck, and I thought he was—" She shook her head. "I put the things together wrong. I'm good at putting things together," she said, with a 7-year-old's precision and an old person's regret. "But sometimes I put them together into the wrong picture." "What did you see him loading?" "Rope and duct tape and a tarp." Jack was quiet for a moment. "That could be a lot of things." "I know that now." She said it flatly. "I didn't know it at 4 in the morning with nobody home." He nodded. That was fair. That was completely fair. Moshem. The call to Millhaven Sheriff's Department came at 7:15. Dolores made it, not because Emma asked her to. Emma explicitly did not ask her to, but because Dolores Kwan had been running this diner for 40 years, and she had a set of values that were uncomplicated and absolute, and one of them was that you don't let a scared 8-year-old sit in a diner all morning without somebody official knowing she was safe. Jack didn't object. He understood the principle, even if he didn't like the machinery it was going to set in motion. Deputy Carla Reyes arrived at 7:40, driving a county cruiser with a cracked bumper and a Pine air freshener hanging from the mirror. She was young, late 20s, maybe 30, with a professional warmth that Emma clocked as professional warmth immediately and responded to with polite wariness. She sat across from Emma in the corner booth with a notepad and a coffee she didn't drink. Jack stayed at the counter. He could hear most of it. Reyes was good. Patient, non-leading, the pauses in the right places. Emma answered in complete sentences, calm in the way that exhausted kids go calm, beyond the point of drama. She explained about the argument, about Ryan loading the truck, about the rain and the road and the diner. He heard Reyes say carefully, "Emma, I need to ask you something, okay? Has Ryan ever hurt you, physically?" A pause. "No," Emma said. "Has he ever hurt your mom?" "No." "Has he made you feel unsafe?" A longer pause. "He makes the house feel tight, like there's not enough air, but he never... No, he never did anything." Reyes wrote something. "Okay. That's really helpful." Another pause. "Emma, do you know if your mom has all the paperwork? Like, when your dad died, was there anything... Did anything get signed about who takes care of you?" Something shifted in the air. Jack felt it before he understood what it was. "I don't know," Emma said. "Okay," Reyes said in the voice of someone who does know but isn't ready to say it. "That's okay. We're going to figure all this out, okay?" Jack turned on his stool and looked at the two of them across the diner. Reyes was writing on her notepad. Emma was looking at her hands. Her face had gone careful and still in the way that things go still before they break. He turned back to his coffee. The machinery was starting. Sheriff Dana Collins arrived at 8:30. She was 50-something, with the kind of face that had been weathered not by sun, but by 2 decades of difficult situations handled with insufficient resources. She came in without a radio squawk or any particular ceremony, took off her hat, ordered coffee from Dolores, sat at the counter 2 stools down from Jack, and drank it for a minute before she said anything at all. "Ryan Holt called the department at 5:20 this morning," she said. Not to Jack, specifically. Not to anyone, specifically. Just into the general air of the diner. Frantic. Genuinely frantic. Described what Emma must have seen and what he was actually doing with the rope and the tape. "What was he actually doing?" Jack said. "Fence job on the north field. Guy 2 farms over hired him for it. He'd been putting it off for 2 weeks and finally committed to it yesterday." She took another drink of coffee. "The tarp was for his tools." Jack looked at his hands. "So she was wrong," he said. She was an 8-year-old child who's been operating on high anxiety for 2 years in a house full of financial stress, who heard a phrase that scared her and then saw circumstantial evidence that confirmed the scariest possible reading of that phrase. Collins turned on her stool and looked at him. "Being wrong under those conditions isn't a failure. It's just being a kid whose systems are too alert." He nodded. "She told you about her father," Collins said. "She told me a lot of things." "You tell her about yours?" He looked at the sheriff. She had steady eyes, the kind that had seen most things and hadn't flinched enough to permanently flinch. "Some," he said. Collins was quiet for a moment. "What's your connection to the Millhaven area, mister? Mercer?" "No connection. I was passing through." "You ride at night a lot?" "I ride when I need to." She absorbed this. "Emma doesn't want to go back to the house," she said. "Not today, anyway. She's not in danger there. Holt checks out clean, no record, no complaints. But she's insisting she won't go back yet, and that's..." Collins stopped. Something moved through her face. "That's where things get complicated." "Complicated how?" Collins turned back to her coffee. She held it in both hands the way people hold something when they're deciding how much of a truth to tell. "Emma's mother is Karen Parker Holt," she said. "Karen's maiden name is Parker. She was never legally Karen Holt. They're not married, and Emma's father, Thomas Parker, died intestate. No will, no designated guardian." She paused. "Ryan Holt has been functioning as Emma's de facto caretaker for 2 years, but he's never legally Emma's anything. Stepfather is a social term, not a legal one, and without a formal adoption or guardianship filing, he has no claim," Jack said. "He has no legal authority," Collins said carefully, "which means Emma isn't in his custody in any formal sense, which means when we locate Karen, who is currently not answering her phone, incidentally, we're going to have a conversation about the fact that this child's legal situation is, to put it plainly, a mess." The morning light was coming through the diner windows now, thin and white. Emma was still in the corner booth with Reyes. Jack could see her in his peripheral vision, sitting straight, hands in her lap, with that unnerving composure of hers. "What happens to her?" he said. Collins set her coffee down. "That depends on what we find when we start pulling at the threads." She looked at him. "It usually gets worse before it gets better." Jack thought about Grace, about the particular way that systems built to protect children failed them. The grinding bureaucratic indifference, the lost paperwork, the overworked caseworkers, the procedural delays while a kid sat somewhere waiting for somebody to get it sorted. He knew that world. He knew the language it spoke and what it could do to a child who'd already lost one anchor. "She's got a grandfather," Emma said. Both of them turned. Emma had come to the end of the counter, quiet as smoke. She was wearing the oversized wool socks and her damp pajamas, and she looked at them both with that direct, unsettling gaze. "My dad's father," she said. "Samuel Parker. I've never met him, but my dad mentioned him once. He said they lost touch." She paused. Does that matter? Legally?" Collins and Jack looked at each other. "That matters quite a bit," Collins said carefully. "Do you know anything else about him? Where he lives? How old he is?" "No," Emma said. "Just the name." She looked at Jack. "Can you find people? With just a name?" He looked at her for a moment. This kid. This specific kid, with the medical tape on her heel and the wool socks and the father's name in her mouth like something she'd been keeping safe. "Sometimes," he said. She looked at him steadily. "Will you try?" By 9:30, Emma's mother, Karen, had finally answered her phone. By 10, she'd arrived at the diner in Ryan's truck, her face carrying the particular devastation of a woman who'd spent 5 hours in the specific terror of a missing child and was now confronted with the specific relief that the child was fine and the specific guilt that she'd had to find out from a sheriff's deputy on a Saturday morning. She held Emma for a long time in the parking lot, out in the mist. Jack watched from inside, through the window, Dolores refilling his coffee cup without comment. Karen was 36 or so, a small woman with Emma's dark hair gone premature gray at the temples, wearing a jacket that was too light for the weather. She held Emma the way people hold things they understand they could lose. Emma let herself be held, her face turned into her mother's shoulder, her fists clenched in the back of Karen's jacket. Ryan stood by the truck. He'd come with her. He stood there in the wet with his hands in his jacket pockets and his baseball cap pulled low, and he didn't try to approach Emma. He understood, apparently, the geography of the moment. He just waited. He looked like a man waiting for a sentence to be read. Collins went out to talk to them. Jack stayed inside. He watched through the glass. He watched Karen's face go through something as Collins spoke. First relief, then confusion, then a dawning particular horror as the legal reality of Emma's situation was apparently explained to her. He watched her look at Emma. He watched Emma look back at her mother with those flat, exhausted eyes that had already done their crying somewhere back on Route 9 in the dark. He watched Collins produce paperwork. He watched Karen's face when she read it. He turned back to his coffee. At 11:15, with the mist burned off and the sky going to something that wasn't quite blue but was trying, Jack Mercer walked out of the Rust Creek Diner and stood in the parking lot beside his bike. The lot was empty except for his Road King and Collins' cruiser. The truck was gone. Emma was gone with it. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the tank. He thought about the way she'd gripped the back of his cut in the dark. 2 small fists in the leather. The press of her forehead between his shoulder blades. The precise, fragile whisper of, "He's coming for me," from a kid who had been keeping her fear very carefully contained for a very long time, and had finally, in the worst possible moment, let just this much of it out. He thought about Grace, which he thought about every day, and had learned not to think about in the specific way that could take him apart. He thought about Emma saying, "I look anyway." He thought about the wool socks. He thought about home is a thing you carry. He pulled out his phone, opened the search bar, typed, "Samuel Parker, County Records, Illinois." Dolores came to the door of the diner and stood with her arms crossed, watching him. "You going east?" she said. He didn't answer for a moment. He looked at the screen, typed, Thomas Parker, obituary, Millhaven, Shaw, Illinois. Not yet, he said. She looked at him the way she'd been looking at things for 71 years. She's a good kid, Dolores said, in case that wasn't clear. It was clear. She went back inside. Jack stood in the lot with the phone in his scarred hand and the faint sound of a semi on Route 9 and the smell of rain-wet gravel and old asphalt in distant fields. He scrolled. He read. He followed one thread to another the way threads go, each one fraying at the end into something else. At 11:50, his phone rang. Collins. The foster placement went through this morning, she said, without preamble. Emma's going to a licensed home in Millhaven, pending investigation of the guardianship situation. She's asking if you're still at the diner. He closed his eyes for a second. What did you tell her? I told her I'd find out. A pause. Are you still at the diner? He looked at the phone. He looked at the road going east. He looked back at the diner, where he could see Dolores moving behind the counter and the coffee machine throwing off its particular steam and the morning light coming through the glass in those thin white bars. I'm here, he said. He didn't know yet that those two words were going to be the most important thing he said in the next 3 months. He didn't know yet what the name Samuel Parker was going to crack open when he finally pulled that thread all the way through. He didn't know yet, couldn't know, that the thing buried in the county records at the bottom of that search was going to change everything. Not just for Emma, not just for the old man with the photographs in the farmhouse, but for Jack Mercer, for what was left of him, for the 3-year silence where Grace's voice used to be. He put the phone in his pocket. He walked back inside. He sat down on the left-end stool nearest the door, and Dolores put a fresh cup in front of him without being asked, and outside Route 9 ran flat and empty in both directions, the way roads do when they're waiting to be used. What Jack found in those county records, buried under 17 years of returned letters and unanswered phone calls and one name that everyone had agreed to forget, was the kind of thing that makes you understand that some disappearances aren't choices at all. But he wouldn't find it today. Today, a car was pulling up to a house in Millhaven that Emma Parker had never seen, driven by a woman she'd never met. And as Emma climbed the steps to a door that belonged to strangers, she did one thing. She looked back. Looking for a road king in the street. It wasn't there. Not yet. The Foster house on Delbert Street was a gray 2-story with white shutters and a wind chime on the porch that rang in a minor key. Emma counted the chimes from the back seat of the county car as they pulled up. 5 copper tubes, the longest one bent at the tip. She noted that. The bent one. Filed it away the way she filed everything away now, in the particular mental archive of a child who has learned that details matter when the big picture keeps shifting. The woman who met them at the door was named Patricia Sells. Mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, a cream-colored sweater with a small stain near the left cuff that she hadn't noticed or hadn't cared about. Her house smelled like dryer sheets and something baked. Not cookies, more substantial. Bread? Maybe. She looked at Emma with the calibrated warmth of a woman who had done this many times and understood that warmth applied too quickly reads as performance. You can put your things in the room on the left at the top of the stairs, Patricia said. I don't have things, Emma said. Patricia looked at Deputy Reyes. Reyes looked at her notepad. We'll get some things together today, Reyes said. Emma looked up the stairs. The banister had a scratch in it, long and diagonal, like something heavy had been dragged past it. She filed that too. Okay, she said. She went up the stairs without being asked again, because asking again was what adults did when they were uncomfortable and wanted to feel like they'd done something, and Emma was tired of watching people manage their own discomfort at her expense. The room on the left had a window that faced the street. She went directly to it. Below, the county car sat at the curb with its engine running. Reyes was still on the porch, talking to Patricia in the low, document-tone voice of official handoffs. 2 houses down, an old man was raking wet leaves in his driveway. No motorcycles on the street. She hadn't expected one. She didn't know why she'd looked. She sat on the edge of the bed, single, blue coverlet, a pillow that smelled like someone else's detergent. And she put her hands on her knees, and she breathed. In the way her school counselor had taught her after her dad died, 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. She'd thought it was stupid then. She didn't think it was stupid anymore. She thought it was the only technology she had that actually worked. 4 in. Hold. 4 out. The wind chime rang once below the window, that bent copper tube a half step flat. She closed her eyes. Jack spent 3 hours at the county records office before they told him he needed to submit a formal request. He spent 20 minutes at a gas station on the south end of Millhaven with his laptop open on the hood of a rental. He'd put the bike somewhere safe. The owner of the diner's brother had a barn. It was an arrangement that didn't require explanation. Running searches through the public records databases he knew how to access because of a period in his life he didn't talk about in detail. A period that predated the leather cut by about 4 years and had left him with specific skills and specific damage in roughly equal measure. He found Thomas Parker's obituary in the Millhaven Courier-Gazette, archived from 2 years ago. Thomas James Parker, 41, long-haul truck driver, survived by his wife Karen and daughter Emma. No mention of a father. No mention of Samuel Parker at all. He found a Samuel Parker in the county property tax records, a farmhouse on County Road 14, East Side, Harlan Township. Paid current. No liens. The property had been in the name of a Samuel Arthur Parker since 1987. He found, in the online court filing index, something that stopped him entirely. A petition for guardianship. Samuel Arthur Parker, petitioner. Emma Grace Parker, minor. Filed 14 months ago. Status: dismissed. Failure to serve. He read it twice. He read the case number. He did the math on the dates. 14 months ago, Emma's grandfather had gone to court. 14 months ago, the petition had been dismissed not on its merits, but because the paperwork never reached the right people. Failure to serve. A bureaucratic mechanism that closed a door without ever telling anyone it had been open. He sat on the hood of the rental in the cold October air and he looked at the screen. Then he searched further. He found 2 more. A petition from 4 years back, before Thomas died, also dismissed, also procedural. And one from 8 years ago, a different kind of filing, a request to establish contact that had been closed out and marked no response. 8 years, 3 attempts, all of them swallowed by the same grinding machinery that swallowed everything. He closed the laptop and looked at the sky, gray and close, the kind of sky that commits to nothing. He pulled out his phone and called Collins. Dana Collins had been sheriff of Millhaven County for 9 years, and in those 9 years she had learned to distinguish between the civilians who called her with information and the ones who called her with an agenda, and she had developed a deep professional skepticism toward the second category. She listened to Jack Mercer lay out what he'd found in the public records, and she didn't say anything for a long moment at the end. "You found that in 3 hours," she said. "I know where to look." That's an interesting skill set for a biker passing through. I'm a man of many layers. A beat. He could hear her tapping something on her desk. The guardianship petition from 14 months ago. We flagged that this morning when we ran the case. It's on the list of things to investigate. Another tap. What I can tell you, and what I probably shouldn't tell you, is that there's a caseworker assigned to Emma's situation now, and the first thing that caseworker is going to do is try to locate viable family. Samuel Parker is viable family. Samuel Parker is an estranged grandfather with 3 failed court petitions and no established relationship with the child. The petitions failed on procedure, not on merit. Silence on the line. Then, "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to ask you something directly, and I'd like a direct answer." "Go ahead." "Why are you still in Millhaven?" He looked at the sky. A crow was doing something complicated on a telephone wire across the street, walking to one end, walking back, walking to one end again. "I told a kid I'd try," he said. Collins was quiet for a moment. "That's not a good reason," she said. "Legally speaking, you have no standing here. You're a stranger who happened to be in a diner." "I know what I am." "So you understand that anything you do from this point forward, any involvement, is personal, not sanctioned, not official, just a man making choices." "That's how most of the important things get done," he said. Another silence. Then Collins said, "The caseworker's name is Linda Marsh. She's overloaded and underpaid, and she has a stack of cases that would make you physically ill. She's going to get to Emma's situation when she gets to it. A pause. That's all I'm going to say about that. Understood, Jack said. The line went dead. He sat on the hood of the rental and looked at the case number he'd written on the back of a gas station receipt. The most recent guardianship petition, the one from 14 months ago, the one that had been dismissed because a piece of paper hadn't made it to the right address. He thought about an old man in a farmhouse on County Road 14, sending papers into a system and getting silence back. He thought about Emma saying, "I've never met him with the particular composure of someone who has filed away the loss and learned to live with the shape of it." He thought about Grace. He got off the hood of the rental and got in and started the engine. BAM, the Iron Valley chapter's Millhaven satellite. Two members who lived in town, used the term loosely, mostly just Dex Cawley's second garage, was a converted space off Meridian Road that smelled permanently of motor oil and old coffee and something chemical that nobody had ever fully identified. Dex had a space heater in the corner that worked about 60% of the time, and a coffee maker that worked 100% of the time, and a card table with 4 mismatched chairs that had hosted more significant conversations than most boardrooms. Jack was sitting in one of those chairs when Dex came in from the cold at 2:30, stomping mud off his boots in the doorway. Dex Cawley was built like a man who had decided early in life that the most efficient shape was rectangular. Wide shoulders, thick through the chest, minimal neck. He had a shaved head and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow that came from a roadside incident in 2017 that he declined to fully explain to anyone. He was one of the most reliable men Jack had ever known, in the specific sense that Dex's reliability was not contingent on the situation being comfortable. He poured himself a coffee, looked at Jack, and sat down. "You're not heading east," Dex said. "Not today." Dex drank his coffee. The kid. Dex set the mug down and looked at the table. He had a particular way of looking at surfaces when he was processing something. Flat and direct, like he was reading information that was printed there. "How old is she?" 8. "Where's she at?" "Foster placement, Delbert Street." Dex turned the mug in a slow circle. "System placement." "Yeah." "How long?" "Until the guardianship gets sorted. Could be weeks, could be longer." Jack put both hands flat on the table. "She's got a grandfather, Samuel Parker. He's been trying to get to her for 8 years through the court system." Dex looked up. 8 years and nobody sorted it? 3 petitions. All dismissed on procedural grounds. The man has been sending letters into a machine that eats them. The space heater kicked on in the corner with a click and a smell of burning dust. Dex looked at it and looked back at Jack. "That's not your problem," Dex said. "I know. You got 3 ongoing commitments back east, Jackson. Briggs is handling the Hartwell situation and he can only carry it so long. Chapel's in 2 weeks." "I know." "So you're telling me you know and you're sitting here anyway?" Jack looked at him. "She asked me if I could find people with just a name. I said sometimes." He paused. "I found him in 3 hours." Dex exhaled through his nose. "So you found him. Give the name to Collins and go home." "Collins doesn't move fast. The caseworker is overloaded. The grandfather's been trying for 8 years and getting nowhere." He stopped. "Emma's 8 years old and she's in a stranger's house." Dex was quiet. The space heater hummed. The coffee maker made a sound like it was considering something. "You're telling yourself it's about the kid," Dex said. Jack looked at him. "I'm just saying what I'm hearing." Dex kept his voice flat, not accusatory. The voice of a man who had enough history with Jack Mercer to not need to soften things. "You've been riding for 3 months. You don't sleep. You show up places and leave before anyone figures out you were there. You haven't been to a chapter meeting since February." He paused. "And now you're in a county you've never been in before, sitting in my garage because you made a maybe promise to an 8-year-old girl who reminds you of someone." The silence stretched. "Say it," Jack said. Dex picked up his coffee. "I just said it." "Say the rest of it." Dex looked at him over the mug. "You can't fix Emma Parker to fix Grace. That's not... It doesn't work that way, Jack." The room went very quiet. The space heater ticked. Jack looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He looked at the crack in the concrete floor that ran from the doorway to the drain, which he'd been looking at for the last hour without registering it until now. "No," he said. "I know that." "Do you?" "I know that." He said it with a flatness that was not defensive. That was the flatness of a man who has said a true thing so many times that it's worn smooth. "She's not Grace. She's Emma. She's her own." He stopped. "She's a specific person with a specific problem, and I'm here and I can help and I'm going to help. That's all it is." Dex looked at him for a long moment. Then he put the mug down. "Chapel's in 2 weeks," he said. "I know. Morgan's going to want to know where you are. I'll call Morgan." Dex pushed back from the table and stood up and went to the coffee maker and refilled his cup. He stood with his back to Jack for a moment, looking at the wall where there was a calendar from 2 years ago that nobody had taken down. "The grandfather," he said. "You going to drive out to his place?" "Today?" Dex nodded. He turned around. "You need backup?" Jack looked at him. "For an old man in a farmhouse?" "I mean, do you need someone with you?" Dex said, not elaborating, not needing to. Jack stood up. "I'll call you if I do." Dex nodded once. That was enough. Busing. County Road 14 went east from the highway into flatland that was all harvested corn and November fields, the stalks cut to stubs, the ground gone the particular brown of exhausted soil. The sky pressed down low. The rental felt inadequate for this particular road. It was a road that wanted something with more weight under it, something that could hold the flat honesty of the landscape without apologizing for existing. The Parker farmhouse sat back from the road at the end of a gravel drive, screened by a row of old oaks that had mostly let their leaves go. It was a white house, or had been white. The paint was going the yellowish gray of age and weather. A barn behind it, closed. A woodpile on the south side, well-stocked and carefully stacked. A garden that had been put to bed for winter, the beds bordered with lumber and the whole thing covered in burlap. Someone tended this place. Jack pulled into the drive and cut the engine and sat for a moment. He was thinking about what to say. He was not good at knowing what to say in most situations, and he was aware of this as a limitation the same way he was aware of his bad knee and his tendency to not eat enough when he was moving, as a fact that required management rather than a flaw requiring correction. He got out of the car. He was halfway up the drive when the front door opened. Samuel Parker was 73 years old and looked like a man who had been made of something harder than the usual materials. He was not tall, 5'9" maybe, and thin in the way of men who don't eat when they're troubled, and had apparently been troubled for a very long time. He had white hair cut short and a face that had been carved into severity by decades of weather and grief and something else. Something Jack couldn't name yet but recognized the shape of. He wore a flannel shirt and canvas work pants and boots that had been well oiled and were going gray at the seams. He stood in the doorway, and he looked at Jack with eyes that were a dark, specific brown, and were not afraid. "You're not from the county," Samuel said. "No, sir." "You're not from any office." "No." Samuel looked at the rental, looked at Jack. "You were at the diner this morning," he said. "Dolores called me." Jack absorbed this. Dolores Kwan, 71 years old, with a network of information that apparently extended to retired farmers in the eastern townships. "She give you my name?" Jack said. "She gave me a description." Samuel looked at his jacket, at the cut. "Said a biker was asking about Emma." "She's safe," Jack said. "She's in a foster placement in Millhaven." Samuel's face did something that he controlled quickly, a compression around the eyes, a tightening of the jaw, the movement of a man managing the impact of information in real time. "Foster," he said. "Guardianship situation is complicated. You know about that better than most." Samuel was quiet for a moment. He looked past Jack at the road, at the flat November fields, at something Jack couldn't see. "Come inside," he said. "But..." The kitchen was the room that told you most of what you needed to know about a person, Jack had always believed. And Samuel Parker's kitchen told a specific story. It was clean with the cleanliness of habit rather than performance. A single coffee cup on the counter, washed and turned upside down on a dish towel. A cast iron pan hung from a hook on the wall. The table was oak, old, with the particular warp of a table that had been through a lot of years and a lot of weather. On the refrigerator, held by a single magnet, was a photograph. Jack looked at it without meaning to. A child, maybe 5 or 6, dark-haired, in a yellow raincoat, standing in what appeared to be a parking lot, laughing at something outside the frame. The photograph had been there long enough that the edges had curled slightly. Samuel saw him looking. "That's 3 years old," Samuel said. "I got it from Thomas." Before he stopped, moved to the counter and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. "My son sent it to me with a note. Said Emma wanted me to have a copy." He put the cups on the table. "That was the last thing I got from him." Jack sat down. He wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. It was the same motion Emma had made this morning in the diner, and the similarity hit him somewhere between the sternum and the throat. "You filed 3 times, Jack said. Samuel sat across from him. He looked at the coffee. "First time was 2016. Emma wasn't born yet. That was a separate matter. Thomas and I had a falling out, and I was trying to—" He stopped. "Doesn't matter now. Second time was 14 months after Thomas died. Third time was last year." He looked up. "All 3 times, the paperwork went somewhere and didn't come back. The most recent one was dismissed for failure to serve." "I know what it was dismissed for. I was there." Samuel's voice was flat and precise, with an anger in it that had been compressed so long it had become something structural, load-bearing. "I had an attorney. She filed it correctly. The address for Karen's attorney was wrong in the county database, and the service went to the wrong office, and by the time anyone noticed, the window closed." He picked up the mug, put it down without drinking. "I filed again and was told there was a 6-month wait before I could repetition, and that wait is still running. I have 2 months left on it." He looked at Jack. 2 months. "And now Emma's in foster care." He said foster care the way people say the names of things they've spent a long time being afraid of. Jack looked at the photograph on the refrigerator, at the little girl in the yellow raincoat, laughing. "She mentioned you," he said. Samuel went very still. "This morning," Jack said. "At the diner. She said, 'Her father mentioned you once. She knew your name.'" The old man looked at the table. He put both hands around his coffee cup and he breathed, the slow and deliberate breath of a man maintaining something by force of will. "Thomas told her about me," he said. Not a question. "Sounds like it." "I didn't know that." He stopped. "I didn't know he told her anything." Jack watched his face, watched the thing moving through it that had no clean name, the particular grief of a man learning that the son he lost had, in some small way, kept him in the picture, that the erasure he'd feared wasn't total. "She wants to meet you," Jack said. "She asked me to find you." Samuel looked up. 8 years old, Jack said. "First morning in a stranger's house. She asked me if I could find people with just a name." The old man looked at him for a long time. Jack held it. He was not good at a lot of things, but he was good at holding a look. "Why are you doing this?" Samuel said. "Somebody has to." "That's not an answer." "It's the answer I've got." Jack picked up his coffee. "I'm going to go to Linda Marsh's office tomorrow morning. She's the caseworker on Emma's file. I'm going to give her your name and the petition numbers and the documentation of the failure to serve on the second petition. I'm going to suggest that the fastest resolution for everyone involved is placing Emma with her paternal grandfather while the court figures out the guardianship." He paused. "That's what's going to happen whether you want it to or not. What I'm asking is whether you're ready." Samuel looked at him. "Ready for what?" "For her." Jack looked at the photograph. "She's not what you think she's going to be. She's specific. She notices things. She says things that are more honest than most adults can handle. She's scared, but she doesn't show it in the usual way." He paused. "She's going to need patience, and she's going to need consistency, and she's going to need someone who doesn't flinch." Samuel followed his gaze to the photograph. "I've been ready for 8 years, he said. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the oaks moved in the wind with a dry sound. "All right," Jack said. He drank his coffee. He didn't go back to Dex's garage. He drove back to Millhaven, and he sat in the rental outside the Foster house on Delbert Street and he looked at the window on the second floor, the one on the left, facing the street, because Emma had told him she always chose windows that faced the street, and he had believed her without knowing he'd filed it away. The light was on. A shape passed the window, small, moving slowly, with the aimless drift of a child who can't settle, back and forth, like a crow on a wire. He pulled out his phone. Collins had given him the foster house number, not without reservation, and not without a lecture about appropriate boundaries, which he'd absorbed without comment. He dialed. Patricia Sells answered on the second ring. "This is Jack Mercer," he said. "I was with Emma this morning. I'm not a relative or an official. I just want to know she's okay." A pause. He heard Patricia assess him through the silence. "She's okay," Patricia said carefully. "She's been quiet all day. She ate dinner." A slight pause. "She asked about you." "What did she ask?" "She asked if the biker was going to come back." Patricia's voice had something in it that wasn't quite judgment and wasn't quite warmth. More like a woman who had seen enough to reserve both until she knew which was warranted. "I didn't have an answer for her." Jack looked at the lit window. The shape had stopped drifting and was standing at the glass. She was looking at the street. "Tell her I found what I was looking for," he said. "Tell her it's going to take a little time, but it's going to be okay." Silence on the line. Then, "Are you sure about that?" "No," he said. "But tell her anyway." He ended the call. He sat there for another moment. The shape in the window didn't move. He couldn't see her face, just the outline of a small person standing still against the light. He started the engine and pulled away. The chapter meeting was Tuesday, 2 weeks away. He called Morgan Voss, the Iron Valley president, from a truck stop outside Millhaven at 9 that night while rain was starting again and the coffee was bad, and the lights of the highway moved past in both directions like something urgent that had somewhere better to be. Morgan Voss had been running Iron Valley for 11 years. He was 56, a compact man with iron-gray hair and a voice that came out of him like it had been manufactured under pressure. He was not a man who required preamble. "Where are you?" Morgan said. "Millhaven. Western side." Millhaven. A pause in which Morgan visibly failed to locate Millhaven on any mental map that mattered. "What's in Millhaven?" "A situation." "What kind of situation?" "A kid in foster care and a grandfather who's been trying to get to her for 8 years in a system that's been eating his paperwork." Jack paused. "I found her this morning, in the diner. She ran out of her house in the rain without shoes." Silence. "Jack," Morgan said, "I know what you're going to say." "Do you?" "You're going to say I'm 3 months out from a bad year and I'm not operating with full judgment and I'm attaching to a situation that isn't mine to fix." He paused. "You're going to say I need to come home." "All of that," Morgan confirmed, "and then some." "I'm not coming home yet." The rain intensified against the roof of the truck stop overhang. A semi pulled out, its tires sending up a long wash of water. "How long?" Morgan said. "Until it's sorted." Define sorted. Until the kid is with her grandfather. Until the system has done what it's supposed to do and somebody who actually knows her is on the other side of a door she can knock on. He paused. "That's sorted." Morgan was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Jack checked the phone to see if the call had dropped. "Chapel's in 2 weeks, Morgan finally said. "I know. Briggs needs you for the Hartwell thing." "I know. I'll handle it remotely." "You can't handle Hartwell remotely, Jack. That's a—" Morgan stopped. When he spoke again, his voice had changed register, dropping from president to something older. "You didn't sleep last night." It wasn't a question. Jack didn't ask how he knew. "No," Jack said. "The night before?" "Some." "The night before that?" He didn't answer. "Come home," Morgan said. Not in order, not quite. The voice of a man who had carried his own damage for long enough to recognize the specific weight of someone else's. "Come home and sleep in your own bed, and come to chapel in 2 weeks, and then if this situation needs handling, we'll handle it right." "She asked me to stay," Jack said. Not in those words. "She didn't ask me for anything, but she looked back when they took her to the car." He stopped. "She looked back the same way Grace used to look back when I dropped her at school. like she needed to know someone was still watching. The line was silent for a long time. 2 weeks, Morgan said. You're back at chapel. Whatever's happening in Millhaven, it pauses for chapel. That's not negotiable. All right? And you eat something. I'm calling Dex and telling him to make sure you eat something. I'm not... Jack. Morgan's voice was flat. You eat something or I'm coming to Millhaven myself and you don't want that because I'll be irritated the whole drive. Jack almost smiled. It surprised him. I'll eat something. Good. A pause. The kid. She got a name? Emma. Morgan was quiet. All right, he said. Take care of Emma. He hung up. The weeks that followed were not dramatic in any conventional sense. They were the drama of ordinary bureaucratic endurance, the kind of sustained, grinding work that doesn't make for clean stories but determines everything. Jack went to Linda Marsh's office on the Monday morning and waited 40 minutes past his appointment time and sat across from a woman who was carrying a caseload that should have been distributed across 3 people and presented her with the Samuel Parker documentation in a manila folder he'd organized the night before at the kitchen table of the motel room he was renting by the week. Linda Marsh looked at the folder. She looked at Jack. Who are you exactly? She said. A person who found information that's relevant to your case, he said. I'm not claiming to be anything else. She looked at the folder. She looked at the 3 petition case numbers. She looked at the failure to serve notation on the second petition. This is going to take time, she said. I know. The grandfather will need a home study, background check. The court will need to approve any placement. She flipped through the papers. This isn't, even with this documentation, this isn't fast. I know. He paused. Is it possible? She looked up at him. She had the eyes of someone who had started this job believing in it and continued believing in it at a significant personal cost. It's possible, she said. If the grandfather's situation is clean, and if the court accepts the documentation, and if... She stopped. There are a lot of ifs. Tell me what you need, he said. From me, whatever I can do to move this forward. She studied him for a moment. Why are you doing this? She asked. The same question Samuel had asked. Somebody has to, he said. The same answer. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she took the folder. Alt. He visited Emma on Wednesday. Patricia Sells let him in with the particular wariness of a woman who had checked his background through Collins and found nothing alarming and had decided to extend provisional trust. Emma came downstairs in jeans and a school sweatshirt that was slightly too big, her dark hair brushed, and her feet in socks, and she looked at him in the doorway of the living room with the expression of someone who has been waiting for a thing and is not sure how to react now that the thing has arrived. You came back, she said. I said I would. You said you'd try to find him. She paused. Did you? I did. Her face stayed careful, controlled, that 8-year-old composite of hope and armor. And? He's been looking for you for 8 years, Jack said. He has a photograph of you on his refrigerator. It's from when you were 5 or 6. Yellow raincoat. Emma's face did something complicated in private that she managed before it got all the way out. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the floor for a moment. He has that picture? She said. Your dad sent it to him. She looked up. Her eyes were bright. Not wet, exactly, just bright, the way things look when pressure is behind them. My dad talked about him like... She stopped. Like it was something sad. Something that didn't work out the way he wanted, but he still sent him a picture. Yeah, Jack said. He still sent him a picture. She breathed in through her nose once, controlled. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. What happens next? He sat down on the stairs in the hallway. Not the couch. Not a chair. On the stairs, so they were at the same level, which seemed important for reasons he couldn't fully articulate. And he explained what happened next. The home study. The background check. The court. The timeline. He told her in plain language, the way she needed things, without the softening that adults did when they thought honesty was cruelty. She listened. She didn't interrupt. She asked 2 questions, both precise, both better than most adults would have managed. What's the most likely reason it would fall through? And what happens to me if it does? He answered both. He didn't lie in either direction. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then, "You'll still be here while the court thing happens?" He looked at her. "I'll be around." "You said that last time." "Last time I said I'd try to find him. I found him." He paused. "I'll be around." She looked at him for a moment with those dark, direct eyes. "Why?" she said. "You don't have to be. You don't know me." He thought about what to say. He thought about what Dex had said. He thought about Morgan. He thought about the shape of a girl in a window. "I know you a little," he said, "and I know what it feels like to need someone to stay where you can see them." He paused. "So I'm staying where you can see me, as long as that's useful." She looked at him for a moment, then she sat down on the stairs next to him, not touching, about a foot away, facing the front door. They sat like that for a while. Patricia came to the doorway and looked at them and went back to the kitchen without saying anything, because she was a woman with enough years in this work to know when something was doing what it needed to do. Outside, the wind moved through the dead maples on Delbert Street. The wind chime rang, that bent copper tube a half-step flat. The home study on Samuel Parker came back clean on a Thursday. Jack got the call from Marsh at 7 in the morning, standing in the motel parking lot with a coffee from the gas station across the street, and he held the phone and listened and said thank you and hung up. He called Samuel. The old man picked up on the first ring, which meant he'd been awake already, which meant he'd probably been awake for a while. "It cleared," Jack said. Samuel didn't say anything for a moment. Jack heard him breathing, heard, very faintly, the sound of the old farmhouse settling in the cold morning. "What's next?" Samuel said, finally. "Court date. Probably 3 weeks out. Marsh is filing the emergency modification request today." He paused. "Samuel, it's moving." The silence on the line had a different quality now. Not the silence of controlled grief, or the silence of a man who has been pushing against a wall for 8 years and has just for the first time felt it shift. 3 weeks, Samuel said. "Could be sooner. Could be slightly longer. But it's moving." Another silence. "I built a shelf this week," Samuel said. "In the room upstairs. I don't know what colors she likes." He stopped. "I didn't know if I should." It seemed presumptuous to build the shelves, Jack said. "Yeah? Build the shelves." He paused. "She'll pick the paint." He heard the old man exhale, a long, controlled breath, the kind that has been held for 8 years. "All right," Samuel said. "All right." Ryan Holt came to the Foster house on Delbert Street on a Friday afternoon. Jack wasn't there when it happened. He found out from Collins, who found out from Patricia Sells, who described the encounter with the precision of a woman who had been paying very close attention. Ryan had come with paperwork, not legal paperwork. A family attorney's letter asserting Ryan's role as Emma's de facto guardian over 2 years and requesting the court consider his continued involvement in Emma's placement decision. The letter stopped short of a formal motion. It was, Collins said, the letter of a man who had gotten legal advice and was using it to open a door without yet committing to walking through. Emma had refused to come downstairs while he was there. She'd stood at the top of the stairs, out of sight, and she'd listened to the voices below, and she hadn't moved until Patricia came and told her he'd gone. Then she'd gone to her room and closed the door. Jack heard all of this from Collins and then sat with it for a while. The thing about Ryan Holt was that he wasn't a villain, which made him harder than a villain. He was a man who had done an imperfect job under difficult circumstances and had come to believe, probably genuinely, that the child he'd lived with for 2 years was partly his. That wasn't malice. That was the kind of human complication that systems weren't built to handle and that couldn't be resolved with a single clear answer. But the letter changed things. The letter meant Ryan was going to contest the placement with Samuel. The letter meant a court that was already moving slowly was going to have a new variable. The letter meant that the 3 weeks Jack had been telling Emma it would take might now be considerably longer. He drove to Samuel's farmhouse. He sat at the kitchen table while Samuel stood at the window looking at the bare oaks on the east side of the property, and he explained the letter. Samuel listened without interrupting. "He's not a bad man," Samuel said when Jack finished. It was not a concession, the way he said it. It was a statement of fact from a man who had spent enough years watching the world to know that the categories of bad and good were insufficient for most situations. "No," Jack said. "He's not. But Emma doesn't want to go back to him. Emma wants to meet you." Samuel turned from the window. He looked at Jack with those dark, specific eyes. "And what happens if the court rules in his favor?" "Then we go to the next step." Jack held his gaze. "We document everything, every petition you filed, every letter, every attorney, every year." He paused. "And we show a court that the person who has consistently fought for Emma, consistently and over the longest period, is sitting in this kitchen." Samuel looked at him. "It's not over," Jack said. "This is the part where it gets hard. This isn't the part where we stop." The old man looked at the window, at the oaks, at the flat gray of the November sky behind them. "3 months ago," Samuel said quietly, "I almost stopped. He pressed his mouth together. "I had the papers to refile, and I sat at this table for a week without sending them. I told myself she probably didn't know I existed, that disrupting her life at this point might do more damage than—" "She knew," Jack said. "She knew your name, and she kept it." Samuel put his hand on the window frame. His hand was old and thin and had worked for a long time, and he pressed it flat against the wood like he was steadying something. "Then I send the papers," he said. "Yeah," Jack said. "You send the papers." Band. The call came on a Sunday night. Jack was in the motel room, 3 weeks into Millhaven, sitting on the edge of the bed with his boots still on and his phone in his hand and a road map of the eastern county spread on the coverlet beside him. Not for navigation, he'd memorized the roads by now, but because he thought better with a map in front of him. Old habit, something about seeing the distances laid flat. Collins. "We have a problem," she said. He looked at the map. "Ryan Holt's attorney filed a formal motion this afternoon," Collins said. "Emergency hearing requested. They're claiming the grandfather is a flight risk." She paused. "There's a record, Jack, in the civil court system from 2009. A custody matter, so an old one, from before Thomas Parker was grown. Something between Samuel and Thomas's mother. It was sealed, but the attorney found the case number and filed a motion to unseal." Jack went very still. "What kind of custody matter?" he said. "I don't know yet. The motion to unseal is pending. The hearing's scheduled for 10 days from now." A pause. "If that record shows what their attorney seems to think it shows, what do they think it shows?" Collins was quiet for a moment. "The motion suggests that Samuel Parker was found in contempt of a prior custody order, that he took Thomas across state lines without authorization when Thomas was 11 years old." She paused again. "If the court reads that and combines it with the failed petitions and the years of failed contact, they could paint a picture of a man who ignores court orders when he doesn't agree with them." Jack looked at the map, at the roads going east and west and the ones in between. "That's a distortion," he said. "I know, but distortions are what attorneys are paid to construct." Collins' voice was careful, professional, stripped of the usual dryness. "Jack, if this unsealing goes through and the record is what they say it is, even a partial truth of it, Samuel Parker's petition gets put on hold, possibly permanently." He looked at the road map. He looked at County Road 14, the line going east to Samuel's farmhouse, the line he'd driven a dozen times in 3 weeks. He thought about an old man building shelves in an upstairs room. He thought about Emma Parker at the top of the stairs, not moving. He thought about 3 attempts, 8 years, letters that went nowhere, a photograph in a yellow raincoat on a refrigerator. "I need to talk to Samuel tonight," he said. "That's not why I called," Collins said. He waited. "I called," she said slowly, "because Ryan Holt's attorney isn't acting alone. There's a third party, someone funding this response." A pause. "The legal firm they hired is out of the city. They don't do Millhaven cases. They do big cases, the kind with money behind them." Another pause. "I don't know who's paying for it, but a man in Ryan Holt's financial situation doesn't hire that firm on his own." The motel room was very quiet. "Someone," Jack said, "is trying to make sure Emma doesn't get to her grandfather. I don't know that for certain, but you think it." Collins didn't answer, which was an answer. Jack stood up from the bed. He put the map in his jacket pocket. He put on his jacket. He looked at the door. "I'm going to need Dex," he said, "and I'm going to need Morgan to make a call." "Jack, whatever you're thinking." "I'm thinking about an 8-year-old girl who asked me if I could find people with just a name," he said. "I found the person. I'm not going to let someone bury them." He opened the door. The cold came in immediately, sharp and specific, with the smell of wet asphalt and dead leaves and the particular dark of a Sunday night in a small town. Down the street, the gas station sign hummed its indifferent light. The parking lot was empty of everything except the rental and a memory of 7 motorcycles gleaming in the rain outside a diner on Route 9. He called Dex. It rang twice. "I need you," Jack said. "Tonight." Dex didn't ask why. That was the thing about Dex Cawley. He didn't require the narrative. 20 minutes, Dex said. Jack stood in the cold with the phone in his hand and looked up at the black sky and thought about a courthouse hearing in 10 days and a sealed record from 2009 and a law firm that didn't do small cases and someone with enough money and enough motivation to make sure a little girl never made it to the one person who had been fighting for her since before she could read. Someone was pulling threads. And whoever it was, they had been doing it for a very long time, and they had counted on everyone around them being too tired or too broken or too buried in paperwork to notice. They had not counted on a man who couldn't sleep. A man who had spent 3 years out running something and had finally stopped running long enough to turn around and see what was actually behind him. They had not counted on Jack Mercer still being in Mill Haven. Down the street, headlights appeared. Dex's truck, coming in from the dark. Jack walked toward the light. Dex's truck smelled like motor oil and old coffee and the particular cold that soaks into metal when it's been sitting in an unheated garage. He drove the way he did everything, without waste, without commentary, with the total physical economy of a man who had decided a long time ago that most movement was optional. Jack rode in the passenger seat with the road map in his lap and his phone on his knee, and the window cracked 2 inches despite the cold because he thought better with moving air on his face. The streets of Mill Haven went past. The gas station, the hardware store with the dark windows, the Methodist church on the corner with a marquee sign that had lost 3 letters and now said something unintentional, the Dollar General, with 1 light out in the parking lot. "Tell me what you know," Dex said. Jack told him. He told him in the order he'd received it, without editorializing, the way you lay out a mechanical problem. Here are the components. Here is how they connect. Here is what doesn't fit. Ryan Holt's attorney, the law firm from the city, the motion to unseal the 2009 record, the third party that Collins had implied without naming. Dex listened without interrupting. He drove. When Jack finished, Dex was quiet for a block and a half, then, "Who has that kind of money in a Mill Haven custody case?" "That's the question. Ryan Holt doesn't." "No." "Samuel Parker doesn't." "No." "So it's someone who wants the kid placed somewhere specific," Dex said, "or someone who wants the kid not placed somewhere specific." "Someone who wants Samuel Parker discredited," Jack said, "before the hearing, before he can get in front of a judge and make his case." Dex turned onto Meridian Road. The garage was 2 blocks up, the light above the door burning orange in the dark. He pulled into the lot and cut the engine and sat. "What's in the 2009 record?" he said. "I don't know yet. Collins said Samuel took Thomas across state lines when Thomas was 11. Contempt of a custody order. That's 30-some years ago." "Yeah." "So someone dug that up." "Someone had it already," Jack said, "or knew where to find it fast." He looked at the garage door. "That's not a search someone does in a week, Dex. That's a search someone does when they already know what they're looking for." Dex looked at the steering wheel. He put both hands on it at 10 and 2 the way he always did when he was working something through. "This isn't Ryan Holt protecting his relationship with a kid," Dex said. "No. This is something else." "Yeah." Dex got out of the truck. But inside the garage, the space heater was doing its 60% thing, managing to warm approximately the area immediately around itself and nothing else. Dex put more coffee on. Jack spread the road map on the card table and stood over it with his arms crossed, and looked at it the way he'd been looking at it for 3 weeks. Not for the roads this time, but for the geography. The relationship between places. Samuel Parker's farmhouse on County Road 14, the courthouse in Mill Haven, where the hearing was scheduled, the law firm in the city, which he'd looked up on his phone during the drive, Kellner, Marsh, and Associates, established 1989, specializing in estate law, property disputes, and civil litigation. Not family law, not custody cases, estate law. He looked at the map. "What does Samuel Parker own?" he said. Dex poured 2 cups. "Say that again." "Samuel Parker, what does he own?" Jack straightened up. "The farmhouse." "What else?" Dex looked at him. "That's where you're going. Kellner, Marsh is an estate firm. They don't do custody cases, so why are they filing motions in a custody case?" He picked up the coffee. "Because the custody case is adjacent to something they do handle." "The property," Dex said. "The property. Or whatever's on the property. Or whatever Samuel Parker has that someone wants access to." Dex sat down. He put his elbows on the card table and looked at the map. "You need to talk to Samuel tonight." "I need more than that. I need someone to go through the county assessor records and the property transfer history for that parcel going back 30 years. Jack looked at his phone. It was past 10. "I need to know if Samuel's been approached by anyone about the land, about selling." "You think this is a land grab?" "I think it could be." "For what?" "It's flat Midwest farmland." "Flat Midwest farmland with something under it or near it or adjacent to it that someone wants." Jack set the mug down. "Or flat Midwest farmland that someone offered to buy and got told no." Dex was quiet. He looked at the calendar on the wall. 2 years out of date, a photograph of a mountain range that had nothing to do with anything in this county. He looked at it the way he looked at surfaces when he was working. "I'm going to call Briggs," he said. "Briggs is in the middle of the Hartwell situation. Briggs knows property records. He did title work for 4 years before he joined the chapter." Dex picked up his phone. "It's what we've got." Jack nodded. Dex dialed. Jack drove to Samuel Parker's farmhouse at 10:40 at night, and the old man was awake, which he'd expected. Samuel opened the door before Jack knocked, which meant he'd heard the car on the gravel drive, which meant he'd been listening for something. The porch light was on. Inside, the kitchen light was on. The rest of the house was dark. Samuel looked at Jack's face and stepped back from the door. They sat at the kitchen table. The photograph in the yellow raincoat was on the refrigerator. The cast iron pan was on the hook. Nothing had moved. The room had the quality of a place where a person had been sitting very still for a very long time. Jack put the road map on the table and he laid it out straight, and he asked Samuel Parker directly about the 2009 record. Samuel looked at the map without seeing it. He put both hands around his coffee cup. "Thomas was 11, he said. "His mother and I had been separated for 6 years at that point. She had primary custody. I had weekends." He paused. "She remarried. The man she married..." He stopped. His jaw moved. He wasn't good to Thomas. Not in the way that leaves marks you can point to in court. The other kind. He looked at the table. "I went to get Thomas for my weekend in February 2009. Thomas met me at the door and he was wearing long sleeves in the house, which he never did, and he was very quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't calm." Jack didn't move. "I took him," Samuel said. "I put him in my truck and I drove. I had a brother in Indiana. I drove to Indiana and I called an attorney and I filed an emergency protective order." He pressed his mouth together. "The court didn't agree with my assessment. They said there was insufficient evidence of abuse. They ordered Thomas returned within 48 hours. He looked up. "I brought him back. I complied. I was found in contempt for the initial removal and given a suspended sentence and reduced to supervised visitation for 1 year." The kitchen was very quiet. "And Thomas's mother's husband?" Jack said. "Thomas's mother divorced him 2 years later." Samuel's voice was flat as the county road outside. "After Thomas turned 13 and finally told a school counselor what had been happening." He paused. "The man did 14 months. I was not consulted on the plea agreement." He looked at Jack. "So that is what the 2009 record shows. That is what they are going to put in front of a judge and frame as a man who disregards court orders when he disagrees with them. Jack looked at the table. And the truth of it, Samuel said, is that I did take my son without authorization. That is on the record, and it is true. He paused. The reason I did it is also true, but reasons require context, and context requires a judge who has time to read it. We'll give them the context, Jack said, in 10 days. Yes. Samuel looked at the photograph on the refrigerator. He looked at it for a long time. Someone gave Ryan Holt's attorney that file number, Samuel said. You said so yourself. Someone knew exactly where to look. He turned back to Jack. Who? That's what I'm trying to find out. Jack paused. Has anyone approached you about this property in the last 2-3 years? An offer to buy? A development inquiry? Anyone from a company or a firm? Samuel went very still. Jack watched his face. 2 years ago, Samuel said slowly, a man came to the door. He said he represented a development consortium. He said they were acquiring parcels in this township for he called it a logistics and infrastructure project. He made me an offer. Samuel put his hands flat on the table. I told him the farm wasn't for sale. He came back 3 months later with a higher number. I told him the same thing. What was the consortium called? He left a card. Samuel stood up. He went to the counter and opened the drawer second from the left and moved things in it with the deliberate precision of a man who keeps things in specific places. He produced a business card. He put it on the table in front of Jack. Meridian Land Partners, LLC, Development and Acquisition. R. Calloway, Regional Representative. Jack looked at it. He turned it over. On the back, in pen, someone, Samuel, had written a date, March 3rd, and beneath it, second visit, May 17th. Did he threaten you? Jack said. He was very polite, Samuel said, both times. He said the offer was time-sensitive. He said the project had community support. He said that holdouts created complications for everyone involved. He paused. He said that people in complicated personal situations sometimes found that cooperation simplified things considerably. Jack looked up from the card. He said that, Jack said. He said that. He knew about the guardianship situation. He knew Emma's name, Samuel said. He said it once, in passing, like it was nothing, like he just happened to mention it. His voice had dropped to something very quiet. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. I do now. The kitchen was completely silent, except for the refrigerator's hum and the oak trees moving outside and the sound of two men sitting with the particular weight of information that changes the shape of everything. They've been watching you, Jack said, for 2 years. And when the guardianship petition moved forward, they moved the attorney in to create a complication. He picked up the card. This isn't about Ryan Holt. Ryan Holt is a lever. The 2009 record is a lever. They're applying pressure points to make Samuel Parker's situation complicated enough that Samuel Parker either gives up the land or loses credibility in court. To get the farm, Samuel said. To get the farm, or what's under it, or what's adjacent to it. Samuel looked out the window at the dark of the east field. There's a natural gas survey, he said quietly. I didn't think it was important. They did a survey of this township 3 years ago. I received a letter about it. The parcel came back with, they said the technical term was a prospective formation. I looked it up. It means there may be gas underneath. Jack looked at the business card in his hand. Natural gas. A consortium buying land. An old man with a complicated legal history and a missing granddaughter, and 8 years of failed court petitions. A law firm filing motions in a case that wasn't their specialty. A man named Calloway who said Emma's name once, like it was nothing. He put the card in his jacket pocket. I need to make a call, he said. He made it from the gravel drive, standing in the cold with his breath coming in clouds and the oaks above him moving in a wind that smelled like frozen fields. He called Morgan Voss. Morgan picked up on the second ring, which at 11 at night meant Morgan also wasn't sleeping. Tell me what you need, Morgan said. Before Jack said a word. Just tell me what you need. 40 years of making that particular calculation and having it be the right one. Jack told him about Meridian Land Partners, about the gas survey, about Calloway and the business card, and the 2 visits and the name dropped like a threat, about Kellner, Marsh, and the motion to unseal and the 10-day hearing. Morgan listened. He was silent for a long time at the end, longer than usual. "This is bigger than a kid in foster care," Morgan said. "Yes." "This is organized. Someone planned this." "Yes." "And they planned it around the idea that Samuel Parker is isolated," Morgan said. "Old man on a farm, estranged from his family, failed petitions, complicated record, nobody in his corner." A pause. "They didn't plan for a biker who can't sleep showing up at a diner at 5 in the morning." "No," Jack said. "They didn't." He heard Morgan breathing on the other end, heard faintly the sound of the Iron Valley Chapter Hall, the particular ambient sound of a building that holds a lot of history in its walls. "Briggs is going to finish the Hartwell thing by Wednesday," Morgan said. "Then I'm pulling him east. He'll bring Tanner." A pause. "Jack, this needs to be done right. By the book, as much as possible. No," he stopped. "Nothing that gives them ammunition. Understood?" "Understood." "Because they're already building a picture of Samuel Parker as a man who operates outside the law. We don't hand them Jack Mercer as an additional data point." "I know." "Do you?" "Morgan, I know." A longer pause. "The hearing is in 10 days. 10 days. Then we have 10 days to build a counter-narrative that makes their case look like what it is." Morgan paused. "I'm going to make some calls tomorrow. There's a civil rights attorney in the city who owes me a conversation. She does property rights cases. She might be interested in what Meridian Land Partners has been doing in this township." "You think this goes beyond Samuel's parcel?" "I think a consortium acquiring land in a natural gas formation doesn't stop at one holdout," Morgan said. "I think there are probably other people in Harlan Township who got that card." He paused. "I think Samuel Parker might not be as isolated as they believe." Jack looked up at the oaks, at the dark sky above them, at the stars that were appearing now between clouds, cold and specific. "Tell Briggs to hurry," Jack said. "Tell me something I don't know," Morgan said, and hung up. He drove back to Millhaven at midnight, and he stopped at the gas station and bought a terrible sandwich and ate it in the parking lot because he'd promised Morgan he'd eat something, and he kept his promises, even the ones made under emotional duress. His phone rang while he was eating. Dex. "Briggs pulled the county assessor records," Dex said, without greeting. 15 parcels in Harlan Township have transferred in the last 3 years, all to LLC structures. 4 different LLCs, but Briggs traced the registered agents, and they all go back to the same filing address in the city. Jack put the sandwich down. "Meridian Land Partners is the umbrella," Dex said. "They've been buying up the township in pieces. They have enough now that Samuel's parcel is..." A pause. Jack could hear papers being moved on the other end, Briggs's voice in the background, low and specific. "Samuel's parcel is the center. The formation they surveyed runs under his land, and if they don't have his parcel, the whole acquisition is useless," Jack said. "Yeah. They need his land to make the rest of it viable. And they've had 2 years to get it, and he keeps saying no," Dex said. "So now they're going after his credibility. They're going after his ability to get his granddaughter. Because a man in a protracted custody battle with a compromised legal history is a man who might eventually, He stopped. "Settle," Jack said. "Trade," Dex said. "Sign the land over in exchange for a guaranteed legal pathway to Emma." The gas station parking lot was empty and cold. A light in the store behind the glass showed the clerk watching something on a phone, his face blue-lit and private. "They were going to offer him a deal," Jack said. "That's what the timing is about. Let the hearing get close enough that Samuel is desperate, then show up with a solution. Sign here, we make the legal complication disappear, Emma comes home. And Samuel Parker signs over land worth..." Briggs is saying the formation estimate for this area is... More paper sounds. "It's significant, Jack. If the formation is what the survey suggests, that land is worth significantly more than what they offered him." Jack looked at the card in his jacket pocket. He took it out. R. Calloway, regional representative. Does Briggs have anything on Calloway? Working on it. Tell him I need it by morning. He knows. A pause. Jack, if this is what it looks like, if Meridian Land Partners has been running this kind of operation across multiple townships, that's not something we handle. That's federal. I know. So we document everything and we take it to someone with the authority to do something with it. After the hearing. Jack, after the hearing, Jack said. Emma comes first. The federal angle is real and it matters, and we're going to do the right thing with it. But Emma is in a foster house on Delbert Street, and she has a grandfather who built her shelves this week, and there's a hearing in 10 days, and none of that waits for a federal investigation timeline. Dex was quiet. Yeah, he said. Okay. Thank Briggs. Thank him yourself when he gets there Wednesday. Jack put the card back in his pocket. He picked up the terrible sandwich. He finished it because a promise was a promise. He was back at the motel at 1 a.m, and he was not going to sleep, and he knew it, so he didn't try. He sat on the edge of the bed with the road map and the business card and his phone and the notes he'd been taking on the back of gas station receipts since the beginning because he'd never been a notebook person. And he laid it all out on the coverlet, and he looked at it. Thomas Parker, dead at 41. Samuel Parker, trying for 8 years. Emma Parker, 8 years old, in a house that wasn't hers, watching a street for a motorcycle that wasn't there. Ryan Holt, a man who meant well and was being used. Calloway, who said a little girl's name like it was nothing. A law firm that handled estates and was filing custody motions. 15 parcels in Harlan Township, all pointing to one farmhouse with a photograph and a yellow raincoat on the refrigerator. He was looking at this arrangement of facts when his phone lit up. Unknown number. He looked at it for a moment. He answered. The voice on the other end was a man's voice, smooth and even. The voice of someone who had practiced being reasonable until reasonable had become a texture he wore. Mr. Mercer, the voice said, my name is Robert Calloway. I think we have some interest to discuss. Jack went very still. The room was completely quiet. The heater ticked. Outside, the gas station sign hummed its indifferent frequency into the dark. How did you get this number? Jack said. You've been spending a lot of time with Samuel Parker, Calloway said, and at the courthouse, and at the county records office. A pause, light and reasonable. You've also been spending a lot of time at a foster house on Delbert Street, talking to a little girl. He let that sit for precisely the right amount of time. I'm just suggesting that we might all save ourselves a great deal of time and discomfort if you and I had a conversation. Every muscle in Jack's body was absolutely still. You're watching the foster house, he said. I'm watching a lot of things, Mr. Mercer. That's what I do. The voice was warm and completely empty of warmth at the same time, the way certain rooms are decorated to look like places where people live. The little girl is fine, by the way, in case you were concerned. Jack stood up. If you go anywhere near that child, he said, and his voice had a quality in it that he recognized from very few moments in his life. Not anger, something below anger, something that had no heat in it at all, which was worse. I'm not interested in the child, Calloway said, still smooth, still reasonable. I'm interested in a parcel of land in Harlan Township. That's all I've ever been interested in. Everything else is a pause. Leverage, a word I don't love but sometimes have to use. He paused again. The leverage works both ways, Mr. Mercer. I've been very patient with Mr. Parker for 2 years. I've been very generous. My patience has limits, and now there's a hearing in 10 days, and if that hearing goes in Samuel Parker's favor and Emma Parker goes to live on County Road 14, the land situation becomes significantly more complicated. People develop emotional attachments. They dig in. He paused. I don't want that complication. So you want me to tell Samuel to take the deal, Jack said. I want you to help Mr. Parker understand the full picture, Calloway said. The 2009 record is going to be very difficult to overcome in 10 days. The judge assigned to this case has a specific history with contempt filings. The legal team we've retained is very good. And you, a slight pause. You're a man with your own complicated history, Mr. Mercer. I imagine you'd prefer that history not become relevant to proceedings in which you've inserted yourself rather prominently. The motel room was very cold suddenly. "What history?" Jack said. "The period before Iron Valley," Calloway said. "The 4 years you don't discuss. The work you did for a particular firm that also isn't discussed." He paused. "The incident in Kentucky in 2014. Jack's hand tightened on the phone. The incident in Kentucky. 4 other people in the world knew about the incident in Kentucky. 2 of them were in Iron Valley. 1 was dead. 1 was Calloway, apparently, and the fact that Calloway knew it meant Calloway had reach into places that should have been sealed tighter than Samuel Parker's 2009 record. "I see that landed," Calloway said. Jack said nothing. "I'm not threatening you," Calloway said. "I'm offering context. The offer to Mr. Parker is fair market and then some. He gets to live the rest of his life without financial pressure. His granddaughter can come visit. Everyone gets something." A pause. "No one needs to know about Kentucky." Jack stood in the cold motel room and he looked at the road map on the bed, and he looked at the business card and the gas station receipts and the notes in his handwriting, and he thought about an old man building shelves in an upstairs room. He thought about Emma at the top of the stairs. He thought about 2 small fists in the back of his leather, cut at 5 in the morning in a diner. He thought about Kentucky. "I'll give Mr. Parker your message," he said. His voice was flat and even and gave nothing. "Excellent," Calloway said warmly. "I'll be in touch about timing." A pause. "Get some sleep, mister." "Mercer, you sound tired." The line went dead. Jack stood in the middle of the room for a long time. Then he called Dex. It rang once. "I need you to find out everything about Robert Calloway," Jack said. "I need it by morning. And Dex..." He stopped. "He's got something on me, from before Iron Valley. If he uses it, it could take me out of this situation entirely, and it could give them ammunition to discredit everything I've done in the last 3 weeks." He paused. "I need to tell you what it is before he does." Dex was quiet for a moment. "Then tell me," Dex said. And Jack Mercer, who had not spoken about Kentucky to anyone in 11 years, sat down on the edge of the motel bed. Jack told Dex everything about Kentucky in 22 minutes. He told it the way you tell things that have been compressed for 11 years. Not in order, not cleanly, with stops and restarts, and the particular difficulty of finding language for things you've spent a decade not finding language for. He told it flat and without self-defense, because Dex Cawley was not a man you defended yourself to. You just told him the truth, and you let him hold it however he needed to hold it. When Jack finished, the line was quiet for a long time. "Okay," Dex said. "Just that. Okay. Not absolution, not judgment. Just a man receiving information and filing it where it needed to go." "Morgan knows part of it," Jack said. "I figured." A pause. "Calloway having that's not a casual dig, Jack. That's someone with access to sealed federal records, or someone who paid a significant amount of money to someone who has that access." "I know." "Which means Meridian Land Partners is connected to something bigger than a county gas formation." "I know." "Which means we are significantly outgunned here." "I know." Jack stood up. He put on his jacket. "Which is why I need Morgan to make that call tonight. The attorney. Anyone he knows with federal reach. Because what Calloway just told me is that he's willing to burn me down to stop this hearing, and if he burns me down, Samuel loses his best advocate, and the case goes sideways, and Emma..." He stopped. "It cannot go sideways." "Jack, it cannot." "I hear you." Dex's voice was steady in the way of something load-bearing. "I'm calling Morgan now. You go back to Samuel's. Don't be alone tonight." Jack was already out the door. Dead. He drove County Road 14 at 2 in the morning with the windows down despite the cold, the November air coming in at 50 miles an hour and doing what it always did, reducing everything to the essential, stripping the noise away until only the actual problem remained. The actual problem was simple: 10 days. A hearing, a sealed record, and a law firm, and a man named Calloway who knew about Kentucky and was not afraid to use it. And somewhere between all of that and the other side of it, 1 8-year-old girl and 1 old man who had been waiting for each other for the entirety of Emma Parker's life. Simple problems. The hardest kind. Samuel was at the kitchen table when Jack came through the door. He had a ledger in front of him, Old, cloth-covered, the pages gone yellow at the edges. And he was looking at it with the expression of a man reviewing a record of losses. Jack sat down. He told Samuel about Calloway's call. He told him about Meridian Land Partners and the 15 parcels and the gas formation. He did not tell him about Kentucky. That was his weight to carry, and he would carry it. Samuel listened without moving. When Jack finished, Samuel closed the ledger and put both hands flat on the cover and looked at the table. So it was never about Ryan, Samuel said. Ryan is real, Jack said. His feelings about Emma are real, but he's being used. And the offer Calloway made you, Samuel said. He wants you to tell me to take the deal. He wants you to sign over the land in exchange for a clear path to Emma. Samuel looked at the ledger. My father worked this land for 30 years. I worked it for 30 more. Thomas grew up on this land. He paused. Emma has never seen it. She doesn't know this land exists. To her, it's just words. Samuel. I'm not saying I'll take the deal. He looked up. I'm saying I understand why Calloway thinks I might. I'm an old man with nothing left to lose except the one thing I can't buy back. He pressed his mouth together. He thinks the land is worth more to me than she is. Is it? No. Flat, immediate. No space around it. No, I'd sign that land over tomorrow if it put Emma in this house. That's not even a question. Then here's what I need you to understand, Jack said. If you take that deal, Calloway gets what he wants without consequence. He's been coercing an old man for 2 years. He's been using your granddaughter as leverage. He knew about your legal history, and he weaponized it. If you sign, all of that disappears. He leaned forward, and he'll do it to the next person, and the one after that. Samuel was quiet. I'm not asking you to be a martyr, Jack said. I'm asking you to hold for 10 days. Let us build the counter case. Let Morgan's contact get eyes on Meridian Land Partners. 10 days and we walk into that courthouse with everything we need. And if Calloway uses what he has on you, Samuel said, what happens then? Jack looked at him. Dolores told me about you, Samuel said quietly. More than you might expect. She's known Morgan Voss for 20 years. She knows who Iron Valley is. He paused. She said you lost your daughter. She said you've been riding blind for 3 years. He looked at Jack's face. She said you were the best and worst possible person for Emma to run into at that diner. Best because you'll fight. Worst because you'll fight until there's nothing left of you. The kitchen was silent. I've got nothing left to protect, Jack said. So that's fine. You're wrong about that, Samuel said. Jack looked at him. If Calloway burns you down in that courtroom, Samuel said, Emma loses the person who found me, who sat at this table, who told her it was going to be okay. He paused. She's already lost one man who sat at her table and told her things would be okay. You understand what I'm saying? The refrigerator hummed. The Oaks moved outside. Jack looked at the photograph in the yellow raincoat. His phone hit the table. Morgan was already calling. But what happened in the next 72 hours moved fast and ugly and without the clean edges that stories like to have. Morgan's contact was a civil attorney named Vivian Park, 50 years old, with a record of property rights litigation that had twice gone to the state Supreme Court. She answered Morgan's call at 7 in the morning, and she listened to 40 minutes of documentation that Briggs had compiled, and she was quiet at the end of it, and then she said, Send me everything. I'll be in Millhaven by tomorrow. Briggs and Tanner arrived Wednesday afternoon in Tanner's black pickup, the bed full of gear and files, and they took over Dex's garage like a command center, laptops open on the card table, county maps taped to the wall, coffee going constantly. Briggs, 34, wire-thin, with the specific focus of a man who found calm in the interior of a problem, pulled the registration documents for all 15 Meridian Land Partners LLCs by Wednesday night and found what Morgan had suspected. 7 different townships across 3 counties, all natural gas formation areas, all with the same pattern of acquisition, all with at least one holdout who had subsequently experienced legal or financial complications. Not Samuel Parker alone. 6 others. Vivian Park arrived Thursday morning with a paralegal in a rolling briefcase and the expression of someone who had been handed a significant problem and found it interesting. She sat at Samuel's kitchen table, and she went through everything, and she asked precise, rapid questions, and she looked at Jack once, directly, and said, "You know this material well for a biker." "I know how to find things," he said, "so I understand." She looked at her notes. The 2009 record, in context, the subsequent abuse finding, the conviction, the timeline. It's not the liability they think it is. A competent attorney can contextualize that in 20 minutes. She paused. The question is what Calloway does when he realizes his primary leverage isn't working. "He has secondary leverage," Jack said. She looked at him. "Then we need to neutralize it before the hearing." She paused. "Tell me." He told her about Kentucky. All of it. The same 22 minutes he'd given Dex, condensed to 12 because Vivian Park was faster than most. She was quiet when he finished. She looked at her notepad. She wrote something. "Was what you did in Kentucky illegal?" she said. "Technically." "Were you ever charged?" "No." "Was anyone harmed?" He looked at the table. "Not by me." Then Calloway using it in a custody hearing is an attempt to introduce irrelevant prejudicial material. I can file a motion in limine to exclude it before he gets it in front of the judge. She wrote something else. It also tells us something important about Calloway. He's using information from sealed federal records. That's a significant exposure for him if the right people start asking how he got it. She looked up. "I'm going to make some calls," she said. "Don't do anything dramatic between now and the hearing." She looked at Jack when she said it. "I'm not dramatic," he said. Dex, from the doorway, made a sound that was not quite a word. The night before the hearing, Calloway called again. Jack was in the garage with Briggs and Tanner, going through the documentation one final time, when the unknown number lit up his phone. He stepped outside. The cold hit him immediately, the particular cold of the night before something that matters, and he stood in the parking lot of Dex's garage with the light above the door casting everything orange and the street beyond dark and empty. "Mr. Mercer," Calloway said. "Calloway." "Tomorrow," Calloway said. The smooth voice had changed, still even, still controlled, but with something under it now, the sound of a man who has checked his hand and found it complicated. Vivian Park had apparently already filed the motion in limine. Apparently someone had been watching the courthouse filings. "I want to make one final offer. To you, not to Mr. Parker. A consulting fee. For stepping back from this situation." Jack looked at the orange light above the door. "How much?" he said, not because he was considering it, but because the number would tell him something about how scared Calloway was. Calloway named a figure. It was significant. It was the figure of a man who needed something very badly and had stopped pretending otherwise. "No," Jack said. Silence on the line. The first real silence. Not the calculated pauses of a man managing a conversation, but the silence of a man recalibrating. "You understand what I'll do in that courtroom tomorrow," Calloway said. "I understand what you'll try," Jack said. "And I understand that your attorney is going to find Vivian Park waiting for him. And I understand that the motion in limine is already filed, and I understand that 6 other families in 3 counties have started talking to each other about Meridian Land Partners this week." He paused. "And I understand that there's a federal attorney who received a package of documentation this morning and is deciding what to do with it." The line was very quiet. "You've been busy," Calloway said. "I don't sleep much." Another silence. "This isn't over," Calloway said, and for the first time the smooth voice had a raw edge to it, the sound of the thing under the texture. "No," Jack said, "it's not. But tomorrow it gets closer." He hung up. He stood in the cold outside the garage, and he breathed. 4 counts in. Hold. 4 counts out. The door opened behind him. Dex came out and stood beside him without a word, and they stood there in the orange light and the cold for a minute without talking. Then Tanner came to the door. "Briggs has something," he said. They went inside. Briggs was at the laptop, his thin face lit blue, his jaw set. He looked up when Jack came in and he turned the screen. "R. Calloway," Briggs said. "Robert Allen Calloway. I found his incorporation documents. Regional representative for Meridian Land Partners, LLC." He paused. "Which is a subsidiary of Kellner Development Group." Jack looked at the screen. Kellner, he said. Same family, Briggs said. Kellner, Marsh and Associates, the law firm handling Ryan Holt's case. Same family name, father and son. He turned the laptop slightly. The attorney handling Ryan Holt's motion is Marcus Kellner, junior partner. His father is David Kellner, founder of Kellner Development Group. He looked at Jack. The law firm and this land consortium are the same operation. They've been both filing the legal interference and running the acquisition. That's not just a conflict of interest. That's coordinated fraud, Vivian Park said from the table. She had been there the whole time. Jack hadn't heard her come back in. She was looking at the screen with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was the expression of someone who has been handed exactly what they needed at exactly the right moment. Can you use it tomorrow? Jack said. She looked at him. I can use it tonight, she said. I'm filing an emergency motion at 6 a.m., and I'm sending a copy to the State Bar Association. She was already reaching for her phone, and to the federal attorney. The garage was very quiet. The space heater clicked on. The coffee maker made its considering sound. Jack looked at the card table. At the road map still spread there, the lines of County Road 14 going east to a white farmhouse, and a photograph in a yellow raincoat and shelves built by an old man's hands in an upstairs room. He looked at the time. 6 hours until the hearing. Get some sleep, Vivian Park said to the room without looking up from her phone. Nobody moved. Or don't, she said, but stay out of my way for the next 6 hours. Outside, somewhere on the empty street, a sound drifted in from the distance. Low and rolling, the particular frequency of a Harley throttling down from highway speed, coming in from the east. Then another. Then a third. Dex went to the garage door and pulled it open, and the cold rushed in, and the sound came with it, closer now, and then headlights swept the lot, and Morgan Voss pulled in on his Road King with Carver and Reese behind him. All three of them rode cold and rode tired and wearing the particular expression of men who had ridden through the night because someone needed them to, and that was... Morgan Voss didn't say much when he climbed off his Road King. He didn't need to. He pulled off his helmet and looked at Jack in the orange light of the garage doorway. And that was its own language. 11 years of it, the specific dialect of two men who had carried things together long enough that silence did the work that other people needed sentences for. He put his hand on Jack's shoulder once, brief. Then he walked inside. Carver and Reese followed. Carver was 46, missing the tip of his left ring finger from a machinery accident in 2019, and he moved through the garage with the quiet competence of a man who assessed rooms the way other people read menus, automatically, completely, without making a show of it. Reese was younger, 31, and he had the particular quality of someone who understood that the right thing to do in certain moments was to stand somewhere specific and not move. And he did that now, near the door, while Vivian Park talked and Briggs ran the laptop and the coffee maker ran its cycle and the night outside pressed against the garage walls with its specific cold weight. They didn't sleep. None of them did. By 5:30 in the morning, Vivian Park had filed 4 motions. The emergency filing documenting the Kellner conflict of interest, the motion in limine to exclude Jack's prior history, a separate filing to the state bar citing coordinated legal and commercial fraud, and a letter, hand-delivered by Tanner at 6 a.m. to the clerk of courts, requesting the hearing record be preserved in its entirety for potential federal review. At 7, she closed her laptop and drank the last of the coffee and looked at the garage ceiling for a moment in the way of someone who has completed a significant piece of work and is locating the edges of it. We go in at 10, she said. Clean clothes if you have them. Everybody sits where I tell them to sit. Nobody speaks unless I say so. She looked at Jack. Including you. Including me, he said. She looked at Morgan. You're Iron Valley chapter president. I am. You have 17 years of documented community work, 2 letters of commendation from County Emergency Services, and a clean record. She paused. You're sitting in the second row behind Samuel Parker, and you're going to look like exactly what you are, which is a man who came a long way in the dark because someone needed him to. Morgan looked at her. That's what happened, he said. I know, she said. That's why it'll work. Jumped. The Millhaven County Courthouse was a building that had been put up in 1962 and hadn't been significantly updated since, all brown brick and fluorescent lighting and the particular smell of institutions, paper and floor wax, and the recycled air of too many difficult days compressed into the walls. The hearing room was small, 8 rows of benches, a judge's bench that was slightly too large for the room, a table on each side. Marcus Kellner, Ryan Holt's attorney, was already seated when they came in. He was 40-something, well-dressed, with the expression of a man who had prepared for one case and arrived to find a different one. He looked at Vivian Park. He looked at the motions in his hand that the clerk had handed him 20 minutes ago. He looked at the room filling with people. Samuel Parker, white-haired and upright, in a flannel shirt that was his best one. Jack Mercer, cleaned up, jacket off, in the back row seat that Vivian had specified. Morgan Voss and Dexon Briggs in the second row behind Samuel, a wall of men who had driven through the night and looked it and didn't apologize for it. Ryan Holt came in last, alone. He sat at his table. He looked at the room. He looked at Samuel Parker for the first time. Really looked. Across the distance of a courtroom in a small county on a gray November morning, and something moved through Ryan Holt's face that was private and complicated and not entirely what Jack had expected. It looked like recognition. Judge Carol Harmon was 63, with reading glasses on a chain and the contained, precise energy of someone who had been running courtrooms long enough to know when something unusual was happening before anyone said a word. She came in, sat, looked at the motions on her desk, looked at the 2 attorneys, looked at the room. "We have a complicated morning," she said. She was not wrong. It took 2 hours. Vivian Park laid out the Kellner conflict with the particular economy of someone who had done this enough times to know that excess words dilute impact. She put the LLC registrations on the record. She put the common family name on the record. She put the pattern of acquisitions and the pattern of legal interference on the record, side by side, dated and sourced and impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Marcus Kellner objected 4 times. Judge Harmon overruled 4 times, in the tone of someone who finds overruling mildly irritating and does it anyway because the law requires it. Ryan Holt sat at his table and listened, and his expression changed by degrees as the shape of what had been done in his name became clear to him. He had known he was getting help with legal fees. He had not known from whom. He had not known why. Jack watched his face across the room and watched the moment. Specific, dateable, the kind of moment a person carries for the rest of their life. When Ryan Holt understood that he had been used, he put his hands flat on the table in front of him. He looked at them. Then he looked at Samuel Parker. Samuel was looking at the judge. He didn't look at Ryan. He sat very straight in his chair with his hands in his lap, and he breathed. And Jack, watching from the back of the room, thought about what it costs a man to sit still in a room where his life is being decided for the 3rd time, and keep his face composed and his hands quiet. Judge Harmon called a 20-minute recess at 11:40. In the hallway, Ryan Holt found Jack. He looked like a man who had not slept and had also just been told something significant about himself that he was still processing. He stood in front of Jack in the fluorescent hallway, and he didn't say anything for a moment. "I didn't know," Ryan said. "I know," Jack said. "Emma," he stopped. "I wasn't trying to. I just didn't want her to disappear. Into a system. I didn't know who Samuel Parker was. I thought I was protecting her." "You were," Jack said, "in the way you knew how to." Ryan looked at the wall, at the brown brick and the nothing it had to offer. "She should be with him," he said. Shouldn't she? It wasn't a real question. It was a man arriving at something he'd probably known for longer than he'd admitted. "She should be with her family," Jack said. "And she can still know you. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Ryan looked at him. "She's scared of me." "She's scared of what she thought that morning," Jack said. "She doesn't know you the way you know her. Give her time and the right distance, and she might." Ryan was quiet. Then he nodded. Once. The nod of a man accepting a thing that costs him. He went back inside. Judge Harmon's ruling came at 12:30. She granted the emergency placement with Samuel Parker pending full guardianship proceedings. She cited the documented history of attempts, the conflict of interest in the opposing counsel, and the home study clearance. She referred the Kellner matter to the state bar and flagged the federal documentation for review by the appropriate authority. She looked at Samuel Parker when she said the words. Samuel Parker sat completely still. Then he put both hands over his face. Just for a moment, just long enough. Then he lowered them and sat straight again, and his eyes were wet and his jaw was set, and he looked like a man who has been holding something for 8 years and has just been told he can put it down. Jack looked at the ceiling. He looked at it for a while. They drove out to Delbert Street at 2 in the afternoon, Samuel and Jack in Samuel's truck, because Samuel had driven it in that morning before the hearing and couldn't quite manage the coordination to drive it now, and Jack drove while Samuel sat in the passenger seat with his hands on his knees and looked at the road. Patricia Sells met them at the door. She looked at Samuel. She looked at the piece of paper Jack was carrying. She stepped back from the door without a word. Emma was at the top of the stairs. She'd known something was happening. Patricia had told her there was a hearing today, that Jack was involved, that it was about her grandfather. She'd been at that window for most of the morning, that second-floor window facing the street. She was wearing the jeans and the oversized school sweatshirt, the wool socks, her dark hair brushed, her hands on the banister. She looked down the stairs at the old man standing in the entry hall below. Samuel Parker looked up. He was holding his hat in both hands, turning it slowly by the brim, which was the only thing about him that showed what was happening inside him. He looked at Emma Parker with the dark, specific eyes that Jack had first seen across a kitchen table on County Road 14, and he didn't say anything. Emma came down the stairs. She came down slowly, one step at a time, holding the banister, looking at him the whole way. She stopped 2 steps from the bottom, which put her at his eye level, and she looked at him the way she looked at everything, completely, carefully, with that old child's assessment that took in more than it showed. "You have a picture of me on your refrigerator," she said. "I do," Samuel said. His voice was rough. He was managing it. "In a yellow raincoat. Your father sent it to me." She looked at him. "He talked about you like it was sad," she said. "But he kept your name. He said it to me once, and he said—" She stopped. "He said, 'That's your grandfather Samuel, and I hope you meet him one day.'" She paused. "I think he was trying to tell me something." Samuel's jaw moved. He pressed his lips together. "I think he was too," he said. Emma looked at his hands, turning the hat. She looked at his face. She looked at the way he was standing, very still, very careful, the way people stand when they're afraid a sudden move will break something. She stepped off the last 2 stairs and she put her arms around him. Not the way she'd held her mother in the parking lot. That had been the grip of a child holding on to something she might lose. This was different. This was careful. One arm and then the other, slow, deliberate, the way you put down something precious rather than the way you grab for it. Samuel Parker put his arms around his granddaughter. He held her like she was the accumulated weight of 8 years of empty mornings. He held her like every returned letter and dismissed petition and unanswered phone call, held her like the photograph in the yellow raincoat and the shelves he'd built in an upstairs room and the 2 visits from a man named Calloway and the cold February when he'd almost stopped trying. He held her, and he didn't say anything. Jack stood in the doorway and looked at the entry hall, and then looked at his boots, and then looked at the street behind him, the gray November street with the dead maples and the wind chime ringing on the porch in that bent, half-step, flat copper voice. He stayed where he was. Oh, they stopped at the Rust Creek Diner on the way back. It was past 4 when they pulled into the lot, Samuel's truck, and behind it 3 Road Kings and Dex's truck, the sound of them arriving carrying across the flat fields in the particular way that sound carries in November, clean and far. The lot was mostly empty. The neon sign blinked its orange word into the early dark. Open. Dolores came to the door before they reached it. She looked at Samuel. She looked at Emma, standing beside him, holding his hand with both of hers. She looked at the line of men behind them, Jack, Morgan, Dex, Briggs, Tanner, Carver, Reese, all of them road-worn and courtroom-worn, and wearing it the way men wear things they don't bother to hide. Dolores Kwan opened the door wide and held it. "Coffee's on," she said. That was all. They filled the diner. They took the counter and the corner booths and the small table near the window, and Dolores moved behind the counter with her particular efficiency, and the coffee came and the eggs came, and nobody talked much, which was fine because it was the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Emma sat at the counter, left end, nearest the door, Jack's stool. She didn't know that. She just chose it the way she chose things, by some calculation that was her own. She sat there with her hands around a mug of hot chocolate, the real kind, and she looked at the dark window above the coffee machine where the parking lot sat empty and the neon blinked its word into the early dark. Jack sat down one stool over. He picked up his coffee. They sat like that for a while. Around them, the diner made its sounds. Low voices, silverware, the coffee maker, the particular ambient frequency of a room that has people in it who are finally, for this moment, not running. "Is it going to be okay?" Emma said. He looked at her. She was looking at the window. "Yeah," he said. "You said that before and you weren't sure." "I'm more sure now." She nodded. She drank her hot chocolate. "He's going to let me pick the paint," she said, "for my room. He told me in the truck." "What color are you thinking?" She considered this seriously, her brow slightly furrowed, in the manner of someone applying real thought to an important question. "Yellow," she said, "but not bright yellow, the kind that looks warm when the light's on." Jack looked at his coffee. "That's a good color," he said. She looked at him sidelong. "Are you going to come back, after you go east?" He looked at the window, at the parking lot and the bikes lined up in the early dark, and the flat fields beyond the lot going out to the flat horizon. He thought about 3 months of riding blind. He thought about roads that went everywhere and arrived at nothing. He thought about the particular texture of a diner counter at 5 in the morning and the sound of small fists in leather. "Yeah," he said, "I'll come back." "Promise?" He looked at her, those dark, direct eyes. "Promise," he said. She nodded once, satisfied. She turned back to her hot chocolate. Morgan Voss caught Jack's eye from the corner booth. He raised his coffee cup slightly. Jack raised his in return. That was all that needed to happen. Outside, the wind moved across the empty fields, the same wind that had been moving across those fields for decades, indifferent and constant, carrying the smell of cold soil and distance and the particular freedom of flat land under open sky. Inside the Rust Creek diner, the neon light did what it always did, blinked orange into the dark, one word, over and over, steady as a heartbeat. Open. Jack Mercer sat at the counter with his coffee going cold in his hands and his boots on the floor and the sound of people around him. Real people, specific people, the ones who'd driven through the dark and filed the motions and built the shelves and held on for 8 years and whispered, "He's coming for me," into a stranger's leather jacket. And for the first time in 3 years, the silence in him had a different quality, not empty, not the silence of something missing, the silence of something finally still. Down the counter, Emma Parker drank her hot chocolate and looked at the window and swung her feet slowly because the stool was too tall and the floor was too far. And on the other side of the diner, her grandfather sat in a corner booth with his hat on the table and his coffee in his hands and his eyes on the girl at the counter, steady and full and not looking away. The engines would start again. They always did. The roads would run east and west and into all the distances that needed covering, and the men in leather would go back to their chapters and their lives and the work that didn't stop because one case resolved. Jack would go east and he would sleep, finally, and he would come back in the spring when the fields were green and the farmhouse on County Road 14 had a room with walls the color of warm yellow light. But not yet, for now the coffee was hot and the diner was full, and outside the neon blinked against the early dark, and somewhere beneath the sound of the wind and the distant highway and the quiet voices of people who had found each other against considerable odds, you could hear it. The engines, cooling in the lot, patient, ready, heading, when the time came, home.